Welcome to episode 66 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast from Dick and Blaze. I am Blaze, your host, and this week it was another perfect round. Just like last week, pretty much almost everyone that we know got perfect rounds in their tipping. It was the top eight essentially versus the bottom eight, and the games pretty much all went as we expected. The only kind of 50-50 one that we expected to see was the Sydney Fremantle match, and that basically was a 50-50 up until the very end, so we will cover that. But we have a lot to discuss this week, so we will jump straight into it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyrek?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. A few personal things that were a bit tough over the weekend, but we got through them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as I said, in the meantime, the round, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. It wasn't interesting, but there was enough in each day to be like, well, there's a bit to watch, a bit to report on. It provides a smooth transition back into full match rounds. So yeah, keen to talk about it. How about yourself?
Yeah, mine wasn't too bad. I've been streaming a fair amount. I finished Astrobot on my streams. I got the platinum trophy for that, 100% of the game. Now I'm playing the new Indiana Jones game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I'm hoping to have that done maybe sometime this week, at least like the story mode sort of stuff. Because Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4 for me comes out tomorrow because I bought the collector's edition. So I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into that. I did watch at least half the games. I was out all of Saturday, so I missed all the Saturday games, including the Richmond Geelong game, which, if you've watched it, you're not missing much. But otherwise, it was a good round for footy for the most part, and I'm pretty keen to get stuck into it.
All right.
So
shall we go to Marvel Stadium?
We shall. Thursday night clash. Team of the bottom four against the team that's basically in the top four. It's North Melbourne hosting the Bulldogs.
Yeah, and look, it's weird because it still felt like a typical dominant Bulldogs game against a lesser team, but honestly, North at least put a much better effort into being at least competitive in this match, even if the Bulldogs sliced through their defensive structures with little to no resistance, as pretty much defense took an early weekend off. Bulldogs look clinical going forward, but with a bit of early brilliance by Nick Larkey, managed to keep up in the shootout with an excellent stoppage to score rate. Even though LDU unfortunately bowed out early in the game, he accidentally clashed with Ed Richards, I think.
Yes, it was with Ed Richards.
Had to leave the game. Purely incidental. Ed Richard wasn't on report. But one of the biggest areas that the Bulldogs were able to dominate was the ground level. Ed Richards again, Liberatore, a bit of a down match, but still absolutely fantastic ground. Actually, no, it wasn't a down match.
Right, I wrote it was best of field. What do you mean?
I know. And I was thinking of the week before. He's actually had a tiny bit of a down month. But then, went back to it into his 250th game. And Kennedy as well, Matt Kennedy. Seemingly winning every 50-50 ball that came into play. The other point, a problem against for the Roos was turning intercept into score, with 98 points conceded off turnovers and 82 points scored of the scoring half chains. It was easy to see why only 12 more intercepts for the Bulldogs turned into 15 more scoring shots, as they primarily happened in the Kangaroos' defensive 50. Unfortunately, you can't be turning the ball over in your own backup. The Bulldogs, they just have avenues to go. They will flip on a dime, score against you, and as I said, just made the gap a little too much. But despite all that being said, the game being reasonably close at three-quarter time, and the Roos having a couple of match lead, is still a win, as the Dogs just continue to be ruthless against not defensively solid teams.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone kind of went into this match expecting the Dogs to win by a fair margin, and again, 49 points, pretty solid margin. But what we saw out of North Melbourne, the fact that they were able to contend, at least up until three-quarter time. And, kind of show, again, that they've been developing, that they've been working on a lot of pretty good stuff recently. It's positive signs, very, very solid positive steps. Of course, one of the stars being George Wardlaw, not being in good form and being out recently hasn't helped them in the past month or so. So hopefully he'll find some form once he comes back from his minor injury as well. There is a little bit of doubt for Nick Larkey going into next week, but he played a really solid match this week up against, kind of going spearhead to spearhead with Aaron Norton, which was very interesting to see in terms of the shootouts. So there are some positive signs going around at North, but yeah, the dogs were just too good.
Yeah, and I think it is just like that ball use from the back half. As I said, it's clear to see, even though both teams aren't like the best users, like at least Bailey Dale, even like a Jay Hannison type is sort of fallen off a bit. He might even play buying a bit up, but you know what I mean? Is they tend to get the meters first. They tend to put it in better positions. Whereas we saw like North there, occasionally it would be McKercher. Actually, I don't think McKercher. To be honest, I think I'm a bit mixed up with some of these games, but I do remember Caleb Daniel getting a few turnovers. The other person on the half-back line, Will Powell, I think he was one who turned the ball over a bit, but as I said, there's just, it just comes with the territory for the Roos. They still don't have, they still haven't found the best system up to prevent their ball users becoming, liabilities. I'm not sure if McKercher was, again, might have been this week, might have been last week, but you sort of get what I'm saying. It just, yeah. But apart from that, as I said, their defense, it is what it is. Again, you can sort of give them a pass for not quite being up to the Western Bulldogs standard. Honestly, it was a bit. It was one of those ones where it was mainly Aaron Norton. He's been the leading person for the last 2 weeks, and then Sam Darcy popped in at the end and was like, "Well, I'll enjoy a few more."
Well, teams have started to figure out how to shut down Sam Darcy. Will Dawson, I think his name was the man who in charge of shutting down Darcy and did a pretty solid job up until the end of that third quarter when Darcy finally got free.
Yeah, it was a bit of junk time. That at the end, it's at a bit of athleticism, you sort of drop off your running a bit. But as I said, it was sort of interesting. As I said, it was a bit of, it was weird because it was like your standard Bulldogs game of like your really top performers are going hard at it. But as I said, it was a few mix, and it was interesting to see, like Joel Freer had his first quiet game for ages. Same with Bailey Dale. He ended up going forward at the end and just kicking a few. And yeah, as I said, so I mean, I guess it was good for the Bulldogs to get a different mix of players going hard at it. Obviously, I have again Liberatore, Bond, and Richards, Kennedy as well. Tim English also, I thought he performed quite well against Sherry.
Yeah, I agree. I think the ruck battle between those two were actually really, really well matched.
Yeah.
Because English,
I mean, you sort of thought it would be
English's
Sherry
ruck work
attack.
has been a little 50-50 over the past couple of weeks. But when he comes up against a really high quality ruck, he will bring his A game, and he definitely did against Sherry.
Yeah, and it's like the tapping was fairly even. Obviously, Sherry still dominates at being able to draw the first clearance. So I'm actually going to check. I want to see how far Sherry is ahead in center clearances, because he would be by far their best center clearance player. I'm going to look at that.
In terms of North Melbourne's midfield, I think he is leading. In terms of comparing himself to other rucks, maybe top 5. Well, he should be top 5.
No, he would be by far clearances. I got no doubt in my mind he would be leading the clearances in terms of ruck.
I mean, to be fair, how many of them really are clearance rucks? There aren't super many.
No, there's a few, but okay, I'll go with ruck first. Actually, surprise, surprise, Tim English
Oh,
is drawn with him in centre clearances. They both average 2.1 per game. Tim English technically gets 0.1 more centre clearances per centre bounce attendance.
mm-hmm.
Stoppage clearance, Tristan Cherry is on 5.2 versus Tim English's 1.9. And 5.2 is far above anyone else. It's almost one more than the next best, which is Brody Grundy, who
Yeah, Brody
has
Grundy's
risen.
been having a hell of a month.
Started slow, but absolutely torn up. And just going in terms of North Melbourne, because there's nothing else I want to say about this game.
No, go
Yes,
on.
he is leading the stoppage clearances. So he gets 5.2 a game. The next best is 3.5 by, believe it or not, Tom Powell.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and centre clearances, that's where Luke Davies-Uniacke is
Yes.
ahead at 2.7. Tristan Cherry, 2.1. Will Phillips, 2.
That's still a fairly even kind of rounding in terms of that midfield. Like it's still young, still developing, but that's not bad numbers in terms of averages.
Yeah, I know. So obviously, yeah, as I said, it just goes to show, and I personally think is actually probably overtaken Gorn for best ruckman this year in
Ooh,
my head. All Australian rankings, I think he's just edged out Gorn. He's had a bit of a
I
quiet
think he
one,
has
and
edged out Gorn, but I think Grundy has edged
yeah,
out him. I think Grundy might
over the
end up
last month,
taking all
over the whole year,
over the whole
I
year. I
could
think
see Grundy
Sherry is
overtaking.
definitely the best. Um,
Yeah,
But I think as we're pushing into the late season and Sydney having improved over the past six
yeah.
weeks, I think Grundy might end up stealing the All Australian
Mm.
from him, which I don't want to
Yeah,
see.
we'll talk
But
about Grundy a bit later.
we will.
But yeah, as I said, because he was very influential in his match. But shall we go for the individual performers for this game?
We shall, and I'm going to start with the milestone man, Tom Liberatore, on his 250th. Absolutely cleaned house. He kicked 2 goals from 27 disposals, 22 of them effective, equating to 81.5% efficiency, 16 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 5 marks, 7 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 11 score involvements, 10 tackles, 39 pressure acts, 5 1%ers, 11 grab ball gets, and 498 metres gained. Sam Darcy was my next player on the list. He continues to impress post his leg injury, getting 4 hitouts with 1 to advantage. I got to mention every stat, okay? Sometimes, when you have multiple rucks, even though he really shouldn't be in the ruck still,
No,
he's still serviceable. He kicked 4-2 from 12 touches. Again, most of them were in that fourth quarter, but that's okay. 9 of them effective. 12 touches, 9 effective, equating to 75% efficiency. 11 contested possessions, 6 marks, with 5 of them being contested and 4 of them being inside 50. 2 clearances, 7 score involvements, 10 pressure acts, and 326 meters gained. And then Rory Lobb, of course, keeps solidifying himself as a bona fide defender. He finished with 15 disposals, 13 of them effective, equating to 86.7% efficiency, 9 contested possessions, 10 intercepts, 9 marks, 4 of them being contested marks, 6 of them being intercept marks, 3 inside 50s, 3 score involvements, 12 1%ers, 8 spoils, and 100% time on ground. Jumping over quickly to North Melbourne, Big Sue Dinklage. He was the spearhead for the Roos, of course, slotting 5-1 from 9 touches, 7 contested possessions, 6 marks, with 4 of them being contested, 5 of them being inside 50, 7 score involvements, 4 1%ers, and 4 spoils. And then young defender Riley Hardiman. I thought he worked pretty hard during the game. He collected 20 disposals, 17 of them effective, equating to 85% efficiency, 4 contested possessions, 10 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, 2 spoils, and 523 meters gained. On the injury front, real quick, LDU did unfortunately come off with concussion with that collision against Ed Richards, so he will miss this week's upcoming game. And Tristan Sherry was assessed for concussion, but has currently been deemed clear. So hopefully, because he has a history with concussions, so we're hoping there's been nothing delayed, nothing's been reported as of yet. So he should be all good to play this week.
Helmet's been scanned, and he should be good to go. But yeah, that was actually interesting. I was thinking about it because I didn't put this together because I know Sam Darcy, Rory Lobb played on Finbar Malley. Finbar Malley being sort of the second ruck for North Melbourne, especially when they go forward. And I was like, you could probably put Rob in the ruck. You know what I mean? I mean, he did ruck for Freo occasionally, and he was fairly good at it. In fact, I think he might have even been drafted as a ruckman.
I think he does sometimes
sure.
play the ruck role when there's a ball
Yeah.
up, down, back. But it's like very, very minor that happens.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like weird how. I guess it's just because they don't have enough tall people down back there. Obviously, James O'Donnell, who I think actually played forward this week. Did he? No.
He might have floated a little
he was
bit,
one of.
but I think it was
No, I think
primarily
O'Donnell
defense.
played on Larky.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, as I said, so did Lucky even have? Yeah, Lucky kicked 5. So
Yes.
yeah, that's probably why they didn't muck around too much with lockdown there.
Oh yeah, that makes
Friday
sense.
Thursday just seems so long ago. So
Yeah, it is.
sorry if I'm a bit all over the place with this one, but
It's all
yeah.
good. So we shall jump over now to our Friday night matches with a debatable if you want to consider this a blockbuster. But we're at the MCG, Collingwood Carlton. Technically Carlton hosting, but you know it's a rivalry match, and yeah, the Pies just did what they normally do against Carlton nowadays because Carlton was just not looking great.
I mean, for a quarter and a bit, maybe it was an arm wrestle. They offensively looked okay-ish in terms of like both teams were scrapping it out, so they didn't fall away too much. But the more the game went on, the more porous Carlton looked on defense, and the worse than worse they would look on offense, especially since Zach Williams, he had a blindingly good first half and a bit. Clearly best player on ground, hitting up targets and kicking goals. Unfortunately, he had to deal with another calf injury, and from that, Carlton just dried up. From what I could gather, anyway. Aside from that, Carlton could mark the ball on the outside. The best running wasn't creating leads, but chasing after tackles as they were outscored. Chasing tackles they couldn't land, and their best movement was from stoppage work. And at the end of the day, they were outscored from stoppages. So it was night and day in terms of defense. Charlie Cameron got fed a few nice passes, but he couldn't convert. Well held by Howe until he was subbed off. Maynard and Jacos both were getting very high intercepts, preventing a lot of Carlton's chance from going in deep. Carlton, on the other hand, were always on the back foot. Loose marking by Carlton's defence let Elliott and McStay have plenty of opportunities, and really the rest just chipped in when the opportunities arose. And when you had poor ball use by Carlton, opportunities were arising aplenty. It was, yeah. Oh, yeah, we've forgotten to do that.
Yeah, no, we'll get around to those.
So,
it was a game where like Carlton definitely tried to, you know, generate their game, but for most of the players just didn't look interested. And like, I don't know if it's just because they know they're not in a great situation, or if it's because they're playing against the team that's currently top of the ladder by 3 games, essentially. It's just, yeah, it's not really looking good, which is unfortunate because like when they are able to get their ball in their forward line, most of the time they are able to convert, whether it is a behind or a goal, it's still something. But it's just there's no other real sort of hope anywhere on the field. Other than from Nick Haynes, because I think Nick Haynes has had a really solid season.
I think it's more like if they don't get you know what I mean, their best looks. If they don't find a way to create kicks that aren't just dump kicks inside 50, because we know they're not that creative with their forward movement. They don't do well when the ball hits the ground, so obviously they're just trying to hit Kerno up on the lead half the time. We saw him, I think he kicked 3 behinds for this game, try to have an impact, but sort of, I wouldn't say let Collingwood off the hook, but definitely didn't damage them when he probably could have. But yeah, as I said, the rest were just like a couple of opportune moments, really, felt, because I only really watched some of the highlights and a bit of the third and first quarter dissected. But all I want to say is when you're talking about disheartened, like they put effort into the first contest because when you look at the stats for this game, it's like, well, the contest play was reasonable. Ground ball gets was similar. In terms of possession, even it wasn't too badly off. But when you actually look in the third quarter, where the game was there to be won, that Collingwood, they were like, okay, the ball's in 50-50. If we win it, we're going to score, because Carlton's second efforts away from the contest absolutely break down.
Yeah.
Like, they win it, they just work it out. They felt like they were scoring time. When they didn't, they were like, well, we don't have to win every contest, because we just know how to set up. They would put enough pressure on the ball carrier, but still have enough shape. They still let their structures hold up. They got faith in them. So, as I said, all of that happens when Carlton win the 50-50. Is it's just a dump kick, and it normally gets intercepted, and Collingwood start up their attack again.
Yeah.
They're not the most lethal ball-moving team by foot from their back half, but they work it forward enough. They get a few opportunities here and there. But again, when it's the 50-50 or Carlton, muff up the ball on the rebound, then they just go lethal mode. And that's where Collingwood get really dangerous. And they have been this week. And Carlton's just not a team that is designed to beat the Magpies the way they are right now.
No, absolutely.
And as I said, it made them look so disheartened. And you know what I mean? You can say effort and all that. It's hard because some of these things accumulate. Obviously, the fact that they break down so easily, and it's something that's happened before, not that great. But you know what I mean? It's just like, it's just the difference between that trust their system and a team that's always trying to feel like they need to make the play to shut down. Like, every Carlton player's like, if I let this person play through, they're going to score against us. And the more that happens, the more likely it is likely to happen. As we know, Collingwood, they love handball chains off the top. They love creating space when people go too aggressive against them. And that's where they'll slice you. And as I mentioned, you know what I mean? It's like Jamie Elliott, he had so many midfielders be able to just like chip him nice little pass. And he's like, oh, thank you very much. I'll keep in touch with the Coleman. And
he was having a field day, that's for sure.
Same with McStay. Absolutely fantastic.
Well, I mean, speaking of Jamie Elliott, shall I just jump straight into our individuals? Did you kind of just went through like your point right off the bat?
Yeah.
All right, so I will start with Jamie Elliott because he is my top. He's my top player. He kicked 4-3 from 15 disposals, 6 contested possessions, 8 marks, with 7 of them being inside 50, 8 score involvements, 15 pressure acts, and 346 meters gained. Darcy Cameron was solid around the ground. He got 31 hitouts with 8 of them to advantage, and 20 touches, 14 of them effective, equating to 70% efficiency. 7 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 8 marks. All 5 of the intercepts that he did have were all intercept marks. 3 inside 50s, 6 score involvements, 4 tackles, 16 pressure acts. Jack Crisp moved the ball well, kicking a goal from 24 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 8 marks, 5 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 6 inside... 5 of those marks were inside 50. I forgot to put a bracket there and it threw me off. 4 clearances, 6 inside 50s, 5 tackles, 15 pressure acts, 5 1%ers, and 584 meters gained. Unless if that 6 inside 50s is actually meant to be score involvements, which is possibly true. It doesn't matter.
More likely. I don't think Jack Cripps had 5 marks for the game, so...
I can't remember. I was tired.
He had 8. It's possible. He had 2 goals, so I'll believe it.
One goal. Either way, he was good. And
Yeah,
then shout out to debutant Rowan Steele. He finished with 19 disposals, 4 marks, 4 inside 50s, 3 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, and 309 meters gained. Over on the Carlton side, Zach Williams did have a solid outing prior to his injury, kicking 3 goals from 19 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 8 score involvements, 13 pressure acts, and 470 meters gained. And Ollie Hollins was great with pressure, finishing with 24 disposals, 20 of them effective, equating to 83.3% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 4 marks, 2 clearances, 2 score involvements, 6 tackles, 31 pressure acts, and 315 meters gained. And as we had already mentioned, Zach Williams, with the only injury of the night, no one was also reported on the MRO front, which is good. So, yeah, there isn't really much more to cover in that aspect.
No, and as I said, it's really funny because the other thing, is like Collingwood, they went into this offseason, they target the half-back line with obviously Houston, partially Perriman. But it is like sort of funny how obviously Houston, probably Houston more so in terms of like from your what do you call it? From what you would expect your output to be. And partially St. Perryman. You know, they haven't actually been producing that much. And yet, I think, you know, it just goes to show their system. And it's a bit of a shame because obviously it means Houston's unlikely to get too many more All Australian years. He might, but his role is a bit less relied on for Collingwood as it was at Port Adelaide. But, you know, it's just, you know, it's just sort of funny how good they are working the ball from halfback still, even though it's not what people want out of a halfback line. You know, they're very, very slow. They're very, very they often have a lot of sideways kicks, and yet, you know what I mean? It's like it's a lot of qualities you would see from like a bottom team, and yet, because Collingwood's so mechanically solid, is the system that works for them, and they're very patient, as I've mentioned, a lot, and you know, it's obviously producing a lot. They're probably one of the best defensive teams that still scores a lot in a very not very defensive year. So, yeah, as I said, it's pretty early, but for the run home, by far and away, Collingwood just are the best team. They're the team that you think you'll be facing in September if your team is good enough to be in that finals mix.
Yeah. Well, again, the rest of the top, well, first and second position, most likely locked down at this point. First definitely is, I would think so. Although there is statistical chance that they can drop out of first. It probably won't happen. But yeah, so whoever falls into that fourth place, they're gonna have a fight on their hands.
Yeah,
because it's gonna be at the
there's
MCG.
a lot of teams that could make it there.
It's gonna be at the MCG. There's gonna be 90,000 people, for that clash in the audience, and it's gonna be up against a very, very dangerous Collingwood.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep. So, you know, I guess we're pretty much finished with that game. Shall we go for a Western clash?
Yes, we are indeed heading over to WA for the clash between the West Coast Eagles and the GWS Giants. But before we do have a retirement to talk about. Being Dom Sheed, the Premiership hero from 2018, has called time.
Yes, we've forgotten to do the couple of retirements for this. So we are going to go a bit off the cuff. But obviously, Dom Sheed probably will be most known for that moment in the 2018 Grand Final. We don't really need to tell you, kicking that goal from the boundary line. Honestly, you're backing in maybe one player out of every 20 to kick that goal, maybe even more. But, you know, he just slotted it like he was born to do it. It's the moment that kids dream of. And, yeah, as I said, he was, but aside from that, a very useful player for a good amount of time. I just need to get up his stats quickly.
Oh, go for it.
Give me a second.
No, you're good. So, like, the fact that he grew up supporting West Coast, that's like, being able to play for the team you grew up supporting isn't very common in the AFL. Like, obviously, there are some, like, father-sons often tend to get away with it. But if you're, like, just a player coming from a different system, whether it's just a random under 18s competition, etc., it's not very likely that you will get to play for the club you grew up supporting, especially if you're from WA or if you're from any of the other interstate clubs, because you're more than likely, it's always a fair chance you'll end up in Victoria. Let's be honest about that. But he immediately got his wish and got to play for West Coast right from the get-go. One club player, nearly 250 games. It's an incredible history.
Man, you know, as I said, sort of that parallel.
Oh, sorry, nearly 170 games. I was minus 80 games. Didn't play as many as I thought.
Yeah, well, 165 regular season and a few more finals. So yeah, obviously a bit of a short career, known for his dash on the outside. As I said, a bit of a compliment to Gaff. Gaff was the accumulator. Sheed was sort of the moment sort of player, sort of that aggressive wing player. Could occasionally kick a few goals. His max was 16 in a season. 2019, funnily enough, he only kicked 8 goals in 2018 when they won the premiership. So the fact that one of those was the goal in the grand final, pretty neat. If you're going to kick under 10 goals for the season, that's the one you're probably going to remember.
May as well make them impactful.
But apart from that, yeah, good tackling pressure. Unfortunately, though, past 2020, he just ended up being a bit of an injury liability. Only played 1 game in 2022, played a few less in 2023, and then just sort of dropped off form a little bit. So, again, feels like probably could have had a longer career. A very serviceable player. As I said, not really one that you're going to be, it's one of the ones where the Eagles will be thankful for more than just that. But you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, you just don't get those moments.
Yeah, it's especially
in
when
most cases,
especially when you're a player who like is just stuck having so many injuries. It's never a guarantee you're going to be able to get fit, get your form, and be able to play in those moments. But it's
and it's a
crazy
shame because he was a good clearance player too. Mainly more stoppage play up in the wing, but still averaged around 5 in his heyday. So it's one of those ones where if he could provide, I'm sure that the worked away. But I guess you know what I mean. It's like, well, you see some young kids coming through, they're offering a bit more provide, body's a bit sore. It's just good to call it. 165 games. When you consider the average player doesn't get past 10, there's so many delistings. Obviously, a lot of that is because of like supplementary draft picks. There's more lower end draft picks than players people tend to remember. But as I said, to get through 10 is a huge achievement, and he's had 165 and a grand final.
Yeah, got a grand final win under that. A couple prelims. It's still a pretty solid career, that's for sure.
Yeah, and honestly, pretty fantastic initial year in 2025, where he just, I think, missed out on being Rising Star. He
finished third overall.
Being Bontempelli?
2015.
Yeah.
Might have been Bont. I can't remember who won it that year.
I feel like it was. Because there's a weird one. There was like Devon Robertson for 1 year for Brisbane. He never really featured again. Anyway, doesn't matter. No. So either way, very good early on, very quick. Just a few injury setbacks. But, as I said, contributed in a very meaningful way. And then when he couldn't, it's sayonara. I'm going to reflect on my career, appreciate it, and
Yeah, agreed. So just to cover all of his career highlights, he won the Larky Medal as best player in the 2013 National Under-18s Championships. He was selected with pick 11 in the 2013 draft, debuted round 1 2014, 2015 Rising Star nominee, finished third, as we had just mentioned, 2015 West Coast Rookie of the Year, 2018 Premiership Player, of course, 2018 Player of the Finals alongside Jack Redden, 2021 second place in the John Worsfold Medal, 2023 round 12 equal career high 43 disposals and kicks a goal against the Pies in his 150th match. I believe they also won that game. 2023 he was also became the West Coast Eagles life member. So in total 165 career matches, 69 goals. That's very nice. And 12 finals wins with a 7-5 win-loss record.
Wow. I'm also looking at the voting for the 2015. Jesse Hogan debuted the same year as Patrick Cripps.
That's right. I forgot they were in the same draft class. It's crazy to think about, like, the superstars we have in...
Yeah.
Like, I was looking back, I was reading an article about Nick Vlaston earlier this morning, and it put into perspective that there were only, like, 20 or so players left from the 2012 draft.
Yeah. And honestly, a lot of this Rising Star is stacked. Jesse Hogan's, Patrick Cripps, Dom Sheed, Isaac Heaney, Angus Brayshaw, Took Miller, Adam Sard, Jake Lever, Jordan De Goey, and a bit of an outlier, Jackson Thurley, who had a very short stint with Geelong.
That's right, he did.
Probably the only player that didn't make much of an impact.
Yeah, that's an insanely stacked roster. Like this roster of draftees, and it only gets more and more stacked as the years went on.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so farewell to Dominic Sheed. Won't be forgotten.
No,
for a lot of reasons.
That is definitely true. And the Eagles have
integral
confirmed
part of AFL law.
Yes, and the Eagles have confirmed that him and Jeremy McGovern will get an official farewell event at one of the games towards the end of the season. I don't know which. It's probably going to be like around 23, 24, I would assume. But shouldn't be too far away. Anyway,
yeah, West Coast are very good at doing right by their players. They get a lot of the fanfare right normally. So yeah, hopefully they'll get a very good send off. There will be a very warm welcome, and hopefully all the West Coast supporters will get around them. They normally do, even when they're struggling. But I think we'll have an extra packed out Optus Oval for that last game for West Coast.
Yep, I agree. Speaking of West Coast, let's officially jump over into their match against the Giants, where the Giants once again, very convincing win. Most people, this was one, and our friend of the show Harry did put this into perspective. This is one that they essentially had to win, in order to kind of stay in touch with potential finals hopes.
Yeah, I guess so. Look, honestly, it's just every team that's Fremantle, GWS, Western Bulldogs, and Hawthorn. Like, they just can't afford to lose to any of the bottom 5 teams. Look, the AFL being even as it is, some of the contenders that are probably out of the final still trying to be respectable. Melbourne, Port, Carlton. I'll still put Sydney in the hunt.
Sydney have a very, very slim chance.
It would take a lot.
But they could definitely surprise a couple teams still with their recent bout of form.
Yeah, exactly. So, as I said, but GWS against the Eagles, it just, it was a bit of a spanking. They were better defensively than they were this time against the Giants earlier in the year. We mentioned how they just absolutely got creamed in the inside 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Both inside 50s against and Mark's inside 50s. But unfortunately, the problem with West Coast was just the around the ground turnovers. An embarrassing 93 turnovers, 30 more than their average for the season. Unless it's some pretty easy goals for the Giants. So you could have scored a lot more than the 68 points that turnovers produced from them. Again, it was a bit of the older veterans that let them down. Duggan, who I've mentioned a bit before, I don't really want to harp on him about him too much, but I did think of this. He had 12 turnovers and 2 score involvements. So there is quite the possibility that he was opposition scoring chains than for his own team, which isn't great.
It's not great
Kelly
at
Baker Kelly Baker and Cripps are all sort of non-factors in this game in terms of the veterans. Still try to generate some offense, especially through intercept and stoppage. Though GWS was fairly successful in getting direct score from stoppage themselves. So it was sort of a bit of a two-way street in that one. GWS were able to concede a few score from stoppage, but because they scored more, they didn't really bother all that much. But it was good to see West Coast at least try and find an avenue there. And yeah, as I said, for a lot of GWS, the best players were generated by the men in the middle. Had better hands, could hit direct targets on the outside. And yeah, they were just very comfortable against a very tepid Eagle side, who only really had a few young players in Harley Reid, Jobe Shanahan, Ruben Gibney. Gibney had an absolutely fantastic game. Apparently, they would have been like miles and miles more in depth if it wasn't for some of his defensive efforts.
Yeah, I agree.
Brady Hoff, he was all right. Sandy Brock and whatever McCarthy's first name is. A lot of new
Tom.
Eagles. I can't remember them all.
Very basic name. Tom.
Tom McCarthy. They could all hold their head up high. So yeah, as I said, bit of a mixed bag. Eagles will be happy how the little chicklets are going. But yeah, some of the I would imagine there's a few more Eagles going home to roost come the end of the season. That won't be the last retirement, I would imagine.
Yeah, like especially if Elliot Yeo continues to have injuries, it's a fair chance they'll lose him.
Yeah.
Tim Kelly is getting on. He might have only another year in him if he decides to go again.
Yeah, it's
There's
just
still a
up in the
couple.
air.
Duggan as well. Like it's not a great. It's not hasn't
Duggan.
been a great season for Duggan.
No, well, as I said, I've been picking them in a bit. Cripps has been up and down, but you know what I mean. I think they just got to sort out. You know, if you're what's his name, Mini Turbo, whatever,
Mini is correct.
McQualter?
McCoulter, yes.
That's the yeah. You just have to have a sit, and it's probably in a group and say, okay, look, we're at a stage. We really need to work out because you can't cast all your veterans out.
Agreed.
And you just have to have an honest chat. When I say as a group, I don't mean like literally as a group, as in, you know, you go through those players, you say, okay, we're talking to everyone. You know, tell me what you think you can bring to the Eagles while we transition away from you. And, you know, you sign a couple for a couple of year deals and you just have to let a couple go because, you know, as I said, they're just taking up spots. And they're not providing all that much. And, you know, as I said, you've got to get something out of veterans, but if they're not providing leaderships and they're not providing stats, you know, it's sort of, you just wonder why bother, really.
Yeah, it's especially if
It's very harsh to say.
It's from what I remember, I think Tim Kelly's contract was a little bit pricey still. So that's definitely one of the few that they'll have to have to put a microscope to or magnifying glass to.
Yeah.
End of season.
You know, as I said, you know, maybe he goes to another club that might pay him, you know, a 2 or 3 year deal that's still a tiny bit of money. I don't think the Eagles will be too upset to let him go. There's probably another club that will buy it. He is still talented, but geez, it just hasn't worked out for him at the Eagles.
Yeah, but the issue is, would he want to go back out east, or would he prefer to stay in Perth? And Freo don't need him.
I mean, sometimes if you know, as I said, if it means playing AFL football, sometimes you just got to make those decisions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there wasn't really much more that we could take from that game. So I will just jump over to our individuals, starting with Xavier O'Halloran. He was a very effective threat for the Giants, kicking 2-2 from 27 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 6 inside 50, 6 clearances, 9 score involvements, 4 tackles, 17 pressure acts, 10 ground ball gets, 645 meters gained. Ryan Angwin was a workhorse, finishing with 24 touches, 17 effective, equating to 70.8% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 12 intercepts, 4 inside 50s, 7 score involvements, 4 tackles, 13 pressure acts, 409 meters gained. Then Lee Kalia was a pillar in defense, especially without Sam Taylor down there. Him and Jack Buckley have had to do a lot of the heavier lifting. He collected 9 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 9 intercepts, 3 score involvements, 8 pressure acts, 9 1%ers, 6 spoils, and 100% time on ground. For the Eagles, Harley Reid was very solid with pressure and showed a little bit more of his inside game. He did try and start a fight. I didn't go very well for him, but that's besides the point. He finished with 24 touches, 12 contested possessions, 5 marks, 4 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 4 score involvements, 7 tackles, 21 pressure acts, and 368 meters gained. And Ruben Ginby, he did the best he could down back. He, again, as you had said, basically the reason why the margin wasn't as big as it was, like, could have been bigger. He collected 16 disposals, 12 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 11 intercepts, 5 marks, 8 1%ers, and 8 spoils. And then shout out to another debutant, Malachi Champion, the one who we know our friend of the show, Snap, was very, very interested in making to an AFL list. He finished with 6 disposals, 3 inside 50s, and 4 pressure acts. Speaking of the Giants' backline, though, Jack Buckley did come up with an ankle complaint. Hopefully it's not too bad. Find out when the injury lists are updated later today or tomorrow. So fingers crossed for him. And then just on the MRO front, Harley Reid was fined $3,750 for said fight against Xavier O'Halloran. And Tom Green was fined $3,750 for striking Harley Reid in return.
Yeah, and look, honestly, it was sort of funny. Some of the conversation around that sort of moments were a bit brain dead. Like, obviously, Harley Reid is who Harley Reid is. Like, oh, is he like, oh, this good a play? Is he that good a like? At the end of the day, he's still providing a lot more clearances than the Eagles are going to get with any other player. No one else is standing up, and it's like they're like, oh, you know, I get like in the future, and like maybe you worry about cultural issues, but like right now, like, oh, he might be upsetting the older veteran talent at the Eagles. Who cares?
Yeah,
You know,
you're not in a
like
position
the
to
older
really.
veteran talent, like if they're thinking some of their season, oh man, Harley Reid, you know, he's such a pest. Like they should be shutting the door because like all they should be caring about is finding ways to get back into the contest.
Mm.
Because as I said, like a lot of them have lowered their colours a fair chunk of this year. So, you know, as I said, I don't want to be too harsh because, you know, as I said, but what Harley Reid does and doesn't do is a fractal problem of what's going on at the Eagles at the moment.
Agreed. Pretty much all I need to find is form and consistency
Yeah.
and synergy, you know, all the actual team-based stuff. Don't worry too much about whether Harley Reid is becoming a thug or whatever. Like, as long as he's generating something for you, whether it's through clearances, whether it's through tackles, or just clean disposal usage, it's better than nothing at all.
Yeah, it's like,
and again, he's a number one draft pick as well. Like you paid a lot for him to go there. You gotta make sure he's worth the while, because otherwise, he will come back home to Victoria, and Richmond may take him.
Yeah, well, I said it. That bit is what it is, but it's like even the other ones, you know, even if you take Harley out of the equation, like get some bigger bodies to provide some contests for players like Clay Hall and Elijah Hewitt, who obviously like don't quite have the frame to always consistently get their own possession. You know, like try and get them into the game just by, you know, having that big body in the middle. Like I mentioned, Jack Graham, it's not sort of his role, and I think that's where they sort of from Jack Graham and Liam Baker, they should really have a bit better clearance work than what they've gotten out of those two. And yeah, I don't think it's individually either of those two.
Well, Fridge has always been more about just tackle and pressure. He hasn't always really like he's the Matt Rowell figure, but slightly more aged. So like his body isn't like fit enough for the clearance work at the same time. Whereas Baker should be the one doing that clearance work off of that tackling pressure. And there's just there's just that
been plug gapped every which way, and it hasn't exactly stuck.
He's always been a bit of that flex player, which is a good thing, but isn't exactly what the Eagles need right now.
Good thing for a good team. For the Eagles, it just seems a bit of a waste, really.
Mm.
And just a final note on the Giants, because I haven't really talked about them. They did fantastically. This is like as good as a performance you can still get by the Giants. But I want to say Ryan Angwin, who you mentioned before, here's one you got to watch out for, because he could be a player like, what do you call him from last year? Kyle Oman.
Yes.
Injured a lot early on, a bit of wraps around him, starting to warm up. I think this might be his third or fourth game. So
he's
a handy player
very young.
To hire. Giants obviously don't have all their players back. They're still fielding maybe a 3/4 strength side, you would call it. So they're still unearthing enough to where hopefully if they get everyone for finals, they're still going to be a very threatening team. Even though I do think they're going to finish maybe I got them pegged at 6, being the most likely place for them.
We will talk about this obviously later with their run home, but I can definitely see them sitting 6th or 7th. I don't think they'll fall out of the top 8. I don't think they'll be one of the teams to fall out, but I don't think they have the viability to push top 4.
No, it's just going to be a bit hard because they need to win a few more earlier in the season when they were shuffling around a bit.
Yeah,
hard schedule. A lot of respectful games, but just a couple too many dropped in that period.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's jump over to our Saturday games, starting off at Marvel Stadium, where the Bombers hosted the Gold Coast Suns.
And look, another spirited performance by Essendon. Obviously much needed after pretty much limping, maybe even crawling to the bye, and still being a bit hobbled by injury. Obviously, players during the bye was the last thing Essendon fans wanted to hear. However, it did come with a limited offensive production. It has been the problem all year with Essendon, and they're still hamstrung by their own defense, as Gold Coast enjoyed a nice height advantage. But that being said, they still had to work through a very spirited and pressure-filled Essendon side. They did try and limit the outside run that Gold Coast could generate. So the problem was in a very free-flowing contest from the back half. Essendon in their moments could score, and as I say, going the other way, they did try, but they'll just be the Suns would roll over them, made transition look fairly easily. It was very much it either worked or it didn't for the Suns in terms of that regard, and it just resulted in the Suns hitting up more varied hotspots inside 50. Look more of a complete attack with the Tulls dominating early before possession domination sort of added a few extra players into the attacking options. Where Essendon just sort of had entry rebounded after entry rebounded. Their forward attack, they got a few outs of a few goals, had some very good forward craft, but the entries themselves were a bit vanilla. And despite the Suns having the game in control, again, is another case where Essendon will be sort of glad that the boot didn't go onto the throat until the last quarter. But again, Suns just sort of did what they needed to do, sort of like the Bulldogs against North Melbourne.
Yeah, it was just one of those games where, again, the Suns. This is the game that the Suns had to win, like the Giants game against the Eagles. Again, the Bulldogs against North Melbourne, they were always going to win that. I feel like, but like the this one especially, Essendon, as you said, they were very spirited. They took the fight to the Suns, and they're definitely becoming a team, despite all of their injuries, that can still be a huge threat. And a lot of that is a credit to their midfield right now.
Yeah, and that was a bit of a shame because obviously their midfield went fairly well. Again, did lose a player in, I think it was Setterfield. He went down in the third quarter, and then they sort of got lost a bit of shape. But, as I said, still respect for them. As for the Suns, though, it's like, you might have a few question marks on them. A 3-game losing streak only curbed by wins against struggling teams who maintain distance at arm's length, obviously being Melbourne and Essendon. But I was looking through the stats because I was like, well, is it that much difference from the way they were before? Like, what do you try and take from this game? But the one thing that did stick out to me is that the Suns have a very simple equation for winning. If they win meters gained, they win. If they don't, they lose. Or when I say that, like the differential, if it's positive or not. So,
Yeah.
As I mentioned, and this sort of went in my, when I said like it was very all or nothing in terms of movement from their back half. That's sort of where, they may struggle against top teams because of that. And that's what makes them, so meterage dependent. Because you know what I mean? Like, if they can just dominate the inside 50 count, their efficiency, it won't bother them as much. They're not the highest efficient team. If they do go very efficient, that's because of the high points of turnovers. But you do got to remember where the Suns are coming from compared to last year, and they had abysmal forward 50 connection last year. And they've had a lot of players that have sort of improved in that regard. I'm talking about Bailey Humphries, the way that they've reframed their midfield. Took Miller as more of a forward half connection. That's being very much improved. When I said Humphries, I meant Noah
That makes more sense.
And, as I said, they've still got a lot of young talent in that forward line. Ethan Reid, Humphries, as I mentioned before, that's why, and Jed Walters, they're going to be a bit iffy. They weren't ever going to have a purely consistent season. They'll come and go. So, the fact that they're still being legitimately top 16, while still having that, they're still finding ways to get it going. It's still a massive tick. I wouldn't worry too much about this middling form period in the middle of the year. And as I said, And as I said, they've got some nice movers on the back half. They found Joel Jeffries over the last month, especially, but even earlier in the season, getting involved. And they're continuing to integrate Rioli, who was sort of found it a bit harder than, weirdly enough, John Noble to get involved. But there's been a few really good games from him. In this middle part of the season.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
think it's sort of another not Rioli, Houston case, where his fit requires him to be less dependent, but he still makes enough from when he gets his moments to where he's being quite the acquisition to the team.
Yeah, agreed. It's really interesting to see like John Noble be like that key running halfback rather than Rioli, and it's such a weird kind of switch up because it's not something that you would have expected from Dimmer, considering Dimmer loves Rioli and like absolutely loved what he provided when he switched to halfback at Richmond. So it's really surprising that John Noble's been the one to stand up, and there's a fair chance he is probably leading their best and fairest because he's had one hell of a season.
I mean, Noah Anderson's going to be winning their best and fairest, but of the non-midfielder, I would say that John Noble will at least be top 3.
Well, yeah, it's reality is the top 3 could probably be Anderson, Rao, and Noble.
Yeah, honestly, I can see Noble above Rao, but again, I think it's just more the case that Gold Coast still don't generate much score from the back half. So even Richmond, at their worst, they would still generate a bit. Obviously, scoring off back half turnovers. So I think what we're seeing is that the Rioli impact on the stats, where because we know as a half, was 12 minutes, so not as much bulk possession. So I think just because John Noble's getting more, he's technically getting involved in more scoring involvements, but if you probably scaled it down to possessions, they're probably fairly even. It's just, as I said. But in terms of having a lot more varied options at the halfback, as I said, it's gone from pretty much not that heavy ball use from the back half to sometimes they get something going.
Yeah,
which again, a bit better than last year, where they were pretty much a forward half team that just relied on just brutalizing a lot of entries to get enough score to win.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much correct. So I'm going to jump over to our individuals, starting with Ben King. He was very clean up forward, kicking 4 goals from 6 disposals, 5 contested possessions, 2 marks, and both of them inside 50, and 5 score involvements. Matt Rowell, in his 100th game, continues to be one of the best pressure mids. He finished with 15 touches, 10 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 15 clearances, 4 score involvements, 17 tackles, and 32 pressure acts. It is very rare to see a player have more tackles than they do touches, but that is elite from him. And then Captain Noah Anderson was effective around the ground, kicking 2 goals from 30 disposals, 10 contested possessions, 8 marks, 6 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 8 score involvements, 4 tackles, 19 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 581 meters gained. Shout out to their debutant, Oscar Adams, who finished with 9 disposals, 4 contested possessions, 3 intercepts, 2 score involvements, 8 pressure acts, 5 1%ers, and 4 spoils. Over on the Essendon front, Nate Caddy was very solid up forward, kicking 3-1 from 12 touches, 9 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 5 marks, with 2 of them being inside 50, 6 inside 50s, 5 score involvements, 3 49 meters gained. Captain Zach Merritt had another monster game, of course, collecting 40 disposals, 31 of them effective, equating to 71.5% efficiency, 17 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 6 marks, 8 inside 50s, 12 clearances. I also want to make a quick shout out to Sam Durham as well for also getting 12 clearances. They were both really elite with their clearance game. Zach Barrett got behind, 9 score involvements, 5 tackles, 20 pressure acts, 13 grab ball gets, and 488 meters gained. And then a brief shout out to rising star Isaac Keiko, who kicked a goal from 17 disposals, 13 effective, equating to 76.5% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 3 inside 50s, 7 score involvements, 5 tackles, 15 pressure acts, and 8 ground ball gets. Then on the injury front, Jai Caldwell came off with an ankle issue. Hopefully it's not too bad. But that was all that was listed.
Yeah, and I guess like again, getting to the end of the year, big question. Should Noah Anderson be the favourite for the Brownlow? Because in my mind, statistically, like, he's the best, like, player rating player. When you watch him play, he does look like it's not like there's not much subtlety to his game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a pill getter. He distributes a lot better than he did last year. So you don't even care, to look at his, disposal impact. Like last year was probably getting a few more possessions, as I mentioned. Probably not as good as ball use as he has this year. And yeah, as I said, in a team that's won enough games, are we just like not putting him in the conversation because no, Anderson, it's like he's a Suns player. You're sort of just expecting the Suns to maybe fade out like last half of the season.
That is probably why he's not like being publicly considered.
Yeah.
But in terms of when you compare him to like the other midfielders that are likely, that are massively in the running, I think he's in with a sneaky chance. I don't know if he'd make top 3. But I think he'll definitely make top 10. I think he's done enough this year to where he'll definitely poll enough votes. Well, the only other player that I think will really take votes off of him is Matt Rowell, really.
Even then, he hasn't, like, he's been a lot more subtle. Like, he's been a lot more tackling pressure.
Yeah,
again,
he's a pressure mid. He's not a distribution mid.
Yeah, which again sort of leans me towards, like, because when you look at the top teams, Collingwood, Nick Dacos.
That'll be a Dacos.
Theoretically, there should be a lot more split votes.
For Collingwood, and I think for the Western Bulldogs, there should be more split votes as well. Because the Doggies have Richards, Liver, Bond, who was out for a solid month, by the way, or longer than a month. So he'll miss a couple of votes there. Kennedy, Freya's had some really solid games recently, so he might sneak a couple. So there's a fair chance that like the top teams may just take votes from each other. So Anderson could be in with a sneaky chance.
Brisbane, you don't trust the umpires to give McCluggage the sort of praise he deserves.
No, of course
I wouldn't be
not.
surprised if he was the surprisingly really should be higher player in the draft pick.
Yeah, you'll look at it and it's probably going to be, it's either going to be an Ashcroft, a Zorko, or a Neil.
Yeah. And then Adelaide, obviously, I think umpires would just give it to Dawson a bit more. Like, I think he'll slightly overrepresented. So, like, Dawson's a sneaky Brownlow chance just because
I think he's had a little bit more quieter games than Anderson has. Like, there have been games where he really got shut down.
Of the season.
He definitely has had a massive year. But there were periods where he did get massively shut down through that midfield. So he might lose a couple there.
Yeah, I just don't trust the umpires to pick up on that, to be honest.
Neither.
So yeah, anyway, that's just a few floating thoughts. We're putting a few more floating thoughts while we're getting to the pointy end of the season.
Yeah, as things start to kind of ramp up towards finals, there tends to be a lot more to talk about, like, Coaches Association voting, Players Association voting, Brownlow, Mark of the Year, Goal of the Year, which we'll probably look at the finalists for those, but we won't like really talk about week by week because it's always just too much. But yeah, this is where the more interesting stuff tends to happen anyway. Speaking of interesting, our next game definitely was not. It was down in Geelong, where Geelong hosted Richmond.
Yeah, man, it's another tough one from the Tigers, and we're not going to say too much about this game unless Blazy has a rant or something stored. Geelong dominated territory. They were far more efficient from the Tigers, especially in the back half. Although, again, looking through the stats, finding a bit of a weird one. Vlosten actually led the game with score launches. He had 5 from the back half.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because you look at our games from the past month, and if we're playing a team that has a solid tagger, they've always gone to Vlosten because our back half is where we generate score. Like, that's kind of just how it's been since the premiership years. Really, it's been Vlosten, it's been Broad, Short, who should hopefully come back. He played in the VFL this week, and they won against Geelong, by the way, which was a great game. I did see bits of that. And Rioli when he was there. Baker when he's went down back, that's where most of our scores are always generated from. And Vlosten's always been our best interceptor in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I just meant more score launches. I'm pretty sure score launches are specific to goals. So if that is true, that's 5 out of 7 of Richmond's goals initiated from Boston. So I don't know if that's exactly true, but otherwise, if it's not goals, it's just a score involvement. So
It's 5 out
anyway.
of 17 still isn't bad.
Yeah, well, that's being said. So anyway, so the point was the Tigers a bit of back half movement, but they had absolutely no tension. It's been a big struggle this year. Unless they get a mark, which has been hard. They haven't had too many. Well, they just struggled to generate shots, really. They did find a few more marking forward targets. Maybe a minor positive out of this one. But the two marks inside 50 for all of Fowl, Mansell, and Bolter was unfortunately far eclipsed by the 9 inside 50 by one Jeremy Cameron. Apart from that, just from the stats, all I could really see was the performance of Morrissey Jr.,
Yes,
which was absolutely fantastic.
I did get to see that part in the
a bit
highlights.
painful. Yeah. Unfortunately, a bit painful because obviously the only reason he did get on injury to Layla.
Yes.
Apart from that, Geelong shredded. Brian Myers, that just hitting target apparently. Their great intercept game meant that Richmond could only find shallow targets, and the midfield just ruthless pressure. Even though the clearances were relatively even, the pressure they were able to provide meant that the scoring from stoppages were in their favour. They got themselves a very nice 6-9, whereas Richmond only got an inaccurate but still 7 scoring shots, 2-5 from centre.
Yes.
Not centre bounce, from stoppages.
So, speaking of Sam Lawler, I know that the media has got a bit of a beat up on this, saying that they rushed him back because he just come back from a hamstring injury. But we gave him an extra week off. And he played a little bit of time in the VFL to prove his fitness. Like, Richmond ticked all the boxes in terms of that. Like, they can't really say too much more. Like, the obviously I had issues with Lafau playing in the Rock after coming back from an ACL, and he did his calf. Like that, but that's a little bit different. But like Lawler ticked all the boxes. Like there was no real genuine guarantee that this was going to happen at all. Like it's just a freak accident that he just happened to redo his hamstring injury.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the thing with soft tissue injuries is like I don't think a week is going to play. I mean, unless you specifically rush him back. Like if it was like, oh, he just after. Or was he off for
he was off for
6 weeks. 6 weeks, exactly. So it's like
it wasn't clearly a rush back, otherwise he would have been back within 4.
I mean, yeah, as I said, so I mean, much ado about nothing. I mean, the media is the media.
Yeah.
Not the best at keeping
tracks. I'm just hoping he doesn't have a similar injury history to what Grimes did, where he had a ton of hamstring issues early in the career. It took him forever to be able to get it right. So I'm hoping it's going to be nothing like that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just a 1-year thing. So you know what I mean? It's like, well, you didn't quite get going. They got a few good things out of Sammy Layla. It's not like a, absolutely disaster. It's not like a Jagger Smith. It's like the whole year's wiped out.
Yeah, that's right.
Got some confidence. He knows when he hits the park, he's got some able to provide. And yeah, Richmond is just like, well, as I said, I'm not sure if it's ruled out for the end of the year, but
not at the moment. But I'd be okay if he was, because I think.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like
full
Richmond
recovery. Full recovery. Maybe getting one to an early preseason with a bunch of the earlier year players. But normally years 1 to 4 normally start first anyway, but maybe start them a little bit earlier. Just start to get that earlier fitness into them. Obviously, they'll still train over the break anyway, as all players do, but they don't go as hard as they maybe should in some cases. But yeah, maybe starting, especially if they're pre-injured players, start them earlier, get that extra amount of fitness into them and preparation. Like getting a full preseason into a lot of these players. Like granted, obviously most of them had a decent preseason when they were drafted, but like Tash Houghton never got a proper preseason. He's tearing it up in the VFL right now after finally recovering from his ACL. And then obviously we have our other ACL boys, like Tyler Young, and McKelty Lafau, who never got a proper preseason. So once they'll get a new preseason in, provided they don't do another injury, that we should look better going into 2026. But for the rest of the year, I'm happy to just rule out any players that currently have, like, even if they're minor injuries, like even if they're like 3 to 4 week injuries, just rule them out for the rest of the season. It's not worth it. And any other players
Yeah.
that we can play, let them play. Give them, just try and get what we can out of them, and just see kind of where the team kind of balances once the season's over.
Yeah, I would say the only flip side of that is you still want to generate enough talent on the park, because it's quite clear, like some of these
Oh yeah,
players are just
100%.
gas.
Like Steely
Like some of
Green.
these rookies have played. Yeah,
Steely Green played in the VFL. He kicked 3 goals. Jaden Short came back.
yeah.
Is coming back by the VFL because he's been out for most of the year. So we'll get him back maybe this week against Essendon, which would be great because I miss Shorty. And then, you know, obviously, you know, we don't really have a forward line, so we're running Fall and Sims, and occasionally throwing Bolter back up there. So we've
Yeah.
got some very inexperienced tools plus Bolter, kind of running up
And
the
it's
front.
like everyone knows some of these players wouldn't be getting consecutive games in a fully healthy list.
Yeah, correct.
So it's all about trying to work out when you can, you know, I mean, it becomes a play management for the rest of the year for Richmond.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
They don't want to get smashed by nearly 100 points every week, so that's what they're trying to.
Yeah, we
prevent,
don't want to
again,
also make it look like we're sandbagging, because that's not a good look
I don't
just in
think they
general.
are.
No,
It's like,
we're
yeah,
not,
it's
but we
just-
don't want it to look like that.
Well, even then, I just think it's like you don't want to crush the kid's confidence. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like it does affect players when they get blown out by that much week in, week out.
Well, it's what
So
happened to West Coast
You got to protect
for
them.
multiple years on top of all their
Sorta, yeah.
injuries.
Yeah, as I said, West Coast has started with injuries and then they develop, but you know, it is true. Like they just don't quite have that knowledge of how to win the hard contest. You know, just because they're so used to getting beaten clearly.
And like I've
starting
had,
to develop that, but
yeah, and like for us, like I have had a look at our run home. There is, with how the teams that we're facing up against, even like the lower tier ones, have shaped up towards the end of this season. We could lose every single game, and I'm okay with that because
whatever.
there's just not much more we can do.
Flip side of getting your wins early, you know what I mean? Like Richmond did what they need to early in the
Yeah, exactly
and, you know, now it's just, you know, as I said, trying to get any form of win. That'll be nice, but you know, as I said, 3 wins. Considering everyone's is like
said we weren't going to get
everyone
any.
thought that this level of Richmond would be entire year Richmond, and they've clearly proved them wrong. They know where they're going, but yeah, as I said, it's just a bit hard with the personnel at the moment.
Yeah, agreed. Speaking of personnel though, Geelong's personnel, they are phenomenal. Starting with Jeremy Cameron, of course. He was the main spearhead up forward, kicking 4-5, a little bit inaccurate, but I mean 9 scoring shots is pretty solid from him regardless. From 19 disposals, 5 contested possessions, 11 marks with 9 of them being inside 50, 2 goal assists and 12 score involvements. Tom Atkins took McRae's pressure work personally. He was like, nah, I'm going to try and have the best round in terms of pressure. Excuse you. He finished with 17 touches, 14 of them effective, equating to 82.4% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 2 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 4 score involvements, 17 tackles, and 37 pressure acts. And
Only even though possessions and tackles.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true. And then debutant George Stevens, who friend of the show Echo was very, very high on. Thought he might have gotten a Rising Star this week. Sadly, he did not, but this is an impressive debut performance. He kicked 1-1 from 21 disposals, 18 of them effective, equating to 85.7% efficiency, 9 contested possessions, 3 marks, 5 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 2 goal assists, 14 score involvements, 3 tackles, 14 pressure acts, and 342 meters gained. Actually, hang on. Was he a mid-season recruit?
George Stewart.
No, George Stevens.
I think he might have been.
Because that might have been.
I thought he was.
Possibly, depending on how old he is whether he's eligible or not. So.
Oh, for Rising Star.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's mid-season.
Is that what
I've got American film director?
Nope, that's not him.
Don't think that's him. Yeah. Yeah.
Go by the AFL page.
Yeah. Draft profile. Okay. No, he was draft. George Stevens. Yeah, he was taken in the normal draft. I think it was the one that no one knew anything about.
Yeah, maybe. That makes a lot of sense.
2023, he was drafted.
Okay, so he was technically still eligible, but just wasn't picked this week.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh well. Anyway, jumping over to the Richmond side of things, Ryan Mansell did some wonderful work. It was great to see him pretty much in full form. He has been very 50-50, but his pressure work has always been very solid. He kicked 3 goals from 22 touches, 17 of them effective, equating to 77.3% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 8 marks, 4 inside 50, 7 scoring involvements, 20 pressure acts, and 423 meters gained. And then I also thought that Jack Ross had a solid outing too when I look back on the highlights. He collected 16 disposals, 6 contested possessions, 3 marks, 5 inside 50s, and behind 6 score involvements, 9 tackles, and 26 pressure acts. Over to the injury front, once again, Sam Lawler did his hamstring first couple of minutes into the first quarter. Wasn't a great sign. Hugo Ralsmith, my boy, came off also with a hamstring complaint. Not looking good for him. And then Bailey Smith was subbed out late with illness. It's Geelong and a late change. It's kind of always expected at this point.
Yeah. I mean, can we get like a vomit bag as proof from the AFL? We need to know.
And then just
I don't know
over,
if he actually had a stomach bug.
I don't know. And then just over on the injury on the MRO front, Noah Bolter was fined $6,250 early plea. Total fine is actually $10,000 for forceful front-on contact against Tom Stewart.
And Facebook comments made no jokes about that statement.
No, I do find it funny though that there was a bit of revenge going on between Nick Vlauston and Patrick Dangerfield. There was with a fair hip and shoulder. I think it was in the second or third quarter. Which were a little bit of flashbacks as to when Dangerfield knocked him out in the 2020 grand final. That's been referenced a couple times already in media this week. So it was just a little interesting thing to see. I love when storylines play out.
Yeah, I mean, look, for some of these tough games, you just got to get the little things from it, really.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, I think Boston was definitely the biggest, as I said, continues to just be a week in, week out performer.
Agreed. He's always been like that. That he's like that superstar player that never really got noticed. But we notice him, and the media has finally noticed him over the past couple of years. And I agree, it is a crime that he has not made All-Australian yet. Well, I don't know if he'll get there this year, but it would be nice.
It would be. I did make it one year, but I guess
he made the squad of 44, anyway. But he never made the full squad.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember that. Anyway.
Yeah, let's jump over now to our Saturday night game up at the Gabba, where the Lions hosted Port Adelaide.
I didn't mind this game, but I know it doesn't exist, but this was a Pyrrhic loss for Port Adelaide. Because it didn't feel all too bad watching it. Like, Port were fairly brave. But even though all the worst things happened, their final hopes are all but shot. ACL to Sam Powell-Pepper and the early game-ending and just confirmed to be season-ending injuries to Asava Gradagalia and Dante Vicentini. You know, it was tough to put a smile on. We saw Ken Hinkley have to go to the lolly bag to end up smiling. But you know what I mean? It was good. It was good. Like, Port started off very early. Like, the 7 unanswered goals that Brisbane got off to the strong start just came out of nowhere. Like, it was, you know, I know Port on the outside didn't defend very well, but it just felt like Brisbane were on another level, and they were at various times of the night. It still felt a lot better than some of the atrocious efforts earlier in the season. Like, after they kicked that 7, I was like, just don't be a game where we lose by nearly 100 points and, you know, they just blow us out the water. And you know what? I mean, the 7 goals was a bridge too far, but, you know, Brisbane, you know, they linked up in the forward half, had good centre clearances, dominated on the outside. But the Port defensively tried, even with the loss of Radaglia, even, you know, with their struggles with some of their smaller midfield, they did all right. They defended fairly bravely deep. They did halt the scoring patches. Obviously, 120 against. They didn't really fully stop it, but you know what I mean? Is like they at least did enough to try and mount a late comeback at the very least. But that were mainly just scoring from tough opportunities rather than finding it as easy as the Lions did at times. As I said, they were just a team possessed offensively, quite ruthless. And unfortunately, and I don't mind this as but yeah, it was just that lack of defensive running on the wings. Jace Burgoyne, he's had a few good offensive games this year. He's not really a defensive runner on that wing. And then you had someone like Zach Bailey, who absolutely killed it. On that, you call it wing, call it half forward, whatever you like, but they're forward wing possession and buttload of goals.
Yes.
So yeah, it was like, you take that away, and it was a fiercely contested midfield contest. Port got their moments, Lions got their moments. Lions also actually had a few defensive troubles. I think Andrews had a good game, but that was really only because Vicentini forced Sweet into the ruck, and that flow-on effect meant that Andrews was playing as a loose, which he loves doing. You just can't keep him accountable. But again, Port just didn't have any options. But they got Luca involved into it. Their attack looked far better. They had a few marking leads. Both teams got decent marks inside 50. And offensively, it's probably one of the better games they've had this year. And, this was a game where they did, A, lose their ruckman, and B, lose forward who was having a pretty influential game up until that point. And, as I said, it definitely was a game where Port could have just bowed out. But, as I said, they kept with them, showed signs for the future. And, as I said, it's bittersweet. Obviously, it was a bit emotional when Ken Hinckley said after the game that, because he's obviously a player coach, and it's like, it really sucks that this is the last game that I'm going to coach Sam Powell-Pepper. And now it's the same of Salva Radaglia and Dante Vicentini. So, but at the end of the day, this rule pretty much rules them out of finals. At this point, they've got to win 7 on the trot and get like a buttload of percentage and rely on 10 teams crapping the bed.
Yeah.
So, you put a line through them, but, as I said, you just want to see, I still think Hinkley's going to coach out the rest of the season. A few players are like, finals are ruled out, bring in Carr, but I don't know. I just don't think that's the way it's going to go. But as for Brisbane, geez, this is the side we wanted to see, because we mentioned throughout the year how they would think about dominating teams. They would stay with it, keep level with teams for most contests. But this is one where they really went in for the kill. Aggressively hunting turnovers, absolutely great outside running. They were definitely more switched on than Port. You know what I mean? Like Port, mostly attacked the game all right. They just had a few, you know what I mean? A few younger players, a few chains fell a bit short, got exposed a few times. It is what it is. Whereas Brisbane, as I said, more on the offensive side, were just absolutely clinical. Just felt unstoppable at times. And as I said, honestly, there was a sort of performance where you would expect them to blow a team by like 60 to 70 points. And I'm actually quite chuffed that Port kept it respectable.
Yeah, like we talked about, like kind of briefly looking at Port's front home, that like they're a team that, whilst they're likely not going to make finals, and this definitely kind of puts a nail in the coffin that they won't make finals, but they're definitely a team that can cause a couple of upsets, cause a couple of surprises to the team still vying for that finals position. And the fact that they managed to kind of take it pretty close to Brisbane for the most part, 28 margin, not too bad. It's like 5-6 goals. But the fact that they were able to still, four and a half goals. You know what I meant. Like the fact that they were able to still very much contend, even despite the injuries that they had, and kind of force Brisbane to play in a less favorable style in a couple of patches. But obviously, the Lions being the Lions, they were able to switch immediately and play the way that they want to play, and it's really hard to stop them when they get to that point because this is why they're the reigning premiers.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's not like as I said, it's like still it's technically a midfield based performance. But for the Lions, it was a lot more on the side. That what they were used for. Like they found a weakness, like it let them out, but at the same time, it was really good that Port put the pressure on. It's not like some games where Port's midfield looks all right, but they get absolutely spanked in terms of like scores against from stoppages. I guess they technically did, but this is more again from the outside contest than specifically the inside. And even then, the stoppage score head to head was 54-45. So as much as Brisbane got a bit of damage going one way, Port easily enough the other way. So again, this was just like a very loose defensive game. And normally Brisbane would blow teams out of the water, but Port put a bit of respect on it. So good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Jumping over to our individuals, and as you had mentioned, Zach Bailey absolutely tore it up. He finished with by kicking 5-1 from 26 disposals, 8 contested possessions, 7 inside 50s, 12 score involvements, 14 pressure acts, and 594 meters gained. Co-captain Harris Andrews was a pillar in defence as he normally is, finishing with 15 touches, 14 of them effective, equating to 93.3% efficiency, 4 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 10 marks, 3 score involvements, 9 1%ers, and 8 spoils. And Kyle Lohmann was very good at ground level this week, kicking a goal from 14 disposals, 11 of them effective, equating to 78.6% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 2 clearances, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, 4 tackles, 8 pressure acts, and 9 ground ball gets. For Port Adelaide, Jack Lukosius looked solid coming back from injury, kicking 3-1 from 14 touches. 11 of them effective, equating to 78.6% efficiency, 4 contested possessions, 9 marks, with 3 of them being inside 50, 5 score involvements, and 6 pressure acts. And then veteran Ollie Wines still providing a lot in that midfield, collecting 22 disposals, 19 of them effective, equating to 86.4% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 5 marks, 3 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 2 goal assists, 9 score involvements, 6 tackles, and 20 pressure acts. On the injury front, as we have already mentioned, Dante Vicentini out with an ankle, ruled out rest of the season. Sava Radaglia out with a hamstring, ruled out rest of the season. And Sam Palpepper with an ACL, which rules him out for about 10 to 12 months. On the MRO front, Hugh Jackson, I thought this originally said Hugh Jackman, and I was very surprised, was fined at $2,000 for kneeing Dane Zorko.
Honestly, it was borderline suspendable in my opinion. It was such a pointless knee. There's no reason he just went out his way to do it. Very dirty dog act, so probably a bit lucky to get off with that. And honestly, maybe just because it's Dane Zorko, who you would sort of also expect to maybe do the same thing. So yeah, maybe a bit lucky there, but no, as I said, otherwise, yeah, there's not really too much to say to that game. Again, it's sort of just a bit. It makes Brisbane look threatening because, as I said, for a while, it's like, well, you can't really say that Brisbane won't be up there contending or whatever, but there was definitely a separation and a big separation between what Collingwood were giving and what Brisbane were. But
yeah,
I honestly think. You know what I mean? It's and the difference between Brisbane mucking around with some other teams, they've got that history. We know what they're able to produce. And you know what I mean? It's well, maybe they were just, I don't want to say biding their time or holding back, but making sure that they know what time of year to go full tilt is. And as I said, so don't give Collingwood the premiership just yet. But as I said, and as I said, there was still a few things. I think defensively, Brisbane actually broke down a fair few times more than they would have liked. It was honestly the worst game I've seen Starcevic play for.
Yeah, I was looking at the
stats,
and he just had a shocker, even stats wise.
Yeah. Well, he just couldn't go on location. So I'm actually surprised that matchup existed because Starcevic is more of a I mean, he can play tall, but I wouldn't exactly play him on the mobile tall. But that's who we got. So maybe they didn't think Leicester would match up on well. Just looking at him, obviously, you're not going to put Harris Andrews. But maybe that's a team thing. Maybe they thought, well, Andrews is going to cause more damage being loose rather than specifically locking down. You know what I mean? Lukosius, you think, oh, well, Lukosius scores 3 goals, but we're going to have a system that outscores that with Harris Andrews on his own. So
yeah,
maybe you shrug your shoulders at that. Only Fagan would know specifically. But yeah, as I said, it definitely left the door, I won't say ajar open, but it's a reason why Port scored 92 points.
yeah.
A combination of decent forward play, which we haven't seen all year, and Brisbane just not quite being there defensively.
Yeah, agreed. Brisbane definitely still have a couple of kinks to figure out, but I'm sure there will be a massive threat come September. But let's jump over to our next Saturday night match, hosted at Marvel Stadium, where the Saints hosted the Hawks.
Yeah, well, honestly, I was a bit, because obviously I watched the Port game. I was watching the scoreboard go up and down, and I was fairly interested to hear that apparently this was a pretty awful game.
Colour me unsurprised.
Oh, look, I know it's the St Kilda game, but you know what I mean? It's like, when you see 74-94, it's like, you can do a lot worse, but apparently it was a bit much ado about nothing. The Saints let the Hawks walk over them early, as I mentioned. Early on, Hawthorn had a bit of dominance. Hawthorn just didn't get it. Then the Saints actually went on to win a lot of the ground stats, but then they just muffed their opportunities, as Max Hole looked like the only clutch player on the ground, at least according to stats.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, the Saints, so at the end of the day, you had a Saints team that seemed to just be booting the ball from halfback, causing a fair too many chains to just end a bit too quickly due to poor use from the back half. You had a Saints team that was struggling in the back because when the ball went to ground, St Kilda were just generating too many tackles and too many ground ball gains inside 50. And really, the inside midfield was pretty bad, so they had to rely on their backup players like Ambrosio, Morrison, Impey, Amon, made a balanced back half to outside attack. Well, St Kilda, it was pretty much Nasai Wanganeen era or nothing in terms of generation, as even Jack Sinclair had a very quiet game. Colin Windhager, just from the profile, seemed to get involved when the ball actually went forward, but weren't as involved linking up. So, as I said, it was just it wasn't pretty attack. The Saints should have got more than what they got. And Hawthorn probably scored a bit too easily when they did get things going. But neither team will probably be looking to say that this was one of their best games. But again, it's another game where Alex Tari, even though Hawk scored a lot, he went apparently beast mode back in that back line. So in terms of the long term, it's not the worst thing for the Saints. They probably just could have capitalized a bit more. They probably, few Saints fan will be upset they didn't get the upset on this one, or even that the fact that it didn't even look that close. And Hawthorn will be like, well, we sort of got away with mucking around a bit, but, we got the job done, scored 94 points. They'll be just happy, I guess.
Yeah.
Win's a win.
I think Saints definitely do have, they have an idea as to, how they really want to play, but they're just not really creating it enough. Now that they have, some tools that they can actually kick it to, it still feels like they'd rather play creatively at ground level. And I don't know if it's necessarily the right kind of option when you have, players like Max Hall, who, just for a note, came from Box Hill. He was playing under the Hawks system, and they swiped him in mid-season. That's
honestly,
that kind of player who now understands kind of both systems now is someone that like St Kilda definitely need to keep in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Because I think mid-season players are only signed for 2 years.
Something like that.
And then
But that'll include the year that they get signed, so it's like 1.5.
yeah, I think it's 1.5 technically. But like this is especially when they're also going up against Josh Battle, a player that they lost at the end of last season to Hawthorn. This was a game that they really needed to kind of show how they really wanted to play and how they really wanted to threaten teams still vying for that finals. And there was some of it, but there wasn't enough of it.
Yeah, and it's like defensively, even though it was 14 points, again, it was more spread. Some of their smalls got involved. Jack Johnson got a bit off the chain, but you know what I mean? In terms of like Caminiti, Taru, the pain of losing Battle, probably less of a sting. Obviously, I've mentioned that St Kilda aren't really a defensive team this year. They've lost that bit of their profile. They're now just a outside team. Sometimes they can get attack going from the outside, sometimes defend.
Well, to be fair, on the St Kilda defense, Cal Wilkie stepped up massively to fill Battle's spot and has done an incredible job.
I wouldn't really say stepped up, but he's definitely played a bit more defensive. Probably not so much in this game.
Yeah, he was a little quiet this game, but
yeah, in others, like it's always been that linchpin. But you know what I mean. It's just like, yeah, for the Saints to defend, they have to do a lot more effort up the ground, and they sort of did that against Hawthorn. Their inside midfield had absolutely shocking games. But as I said, that can only really get you so far. They've said Hawthorn, when they can score so easily from the outside, it doesn't bother them. But again, I think this is one of those things where it's like a reminder to Hawks fan that they've got to get a bit more balance from the inside midfield against the top teams, because this is where you could attack them.
I think missing Weddle is going to be hurt a lot more than what people think, because he has done a lot for that midfield this season.
Well, again, it's like, as I said, that's an important link outside. It didn't really damage them as much this week, but again, you know what I mean? It's like, you lose a player like Weddle that can just create opportunities, and then all of a sudden your forward line gets a lot less creative, and the Hawthorn forward line needs to be creative, a lot like St Kilda. They don't have the best options. Joel got a couple of goals, but he wasn't really lively. He was actually well held down. Caminiti, apparently. So, but as I said, it's like, again, more warning signs, but like a lot of the teams in the top 8 that have done well this last few weeks, it's like, it's warning signs, but you're not going to take it too seriously. It's just tweaks here and there. As long as you're getting the wins, you sort of just shrug your shoulders.
Yeah, all they're really focusing on is
bits and pieces.
Is those 4 points and somewhat decent percentage.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of Hawthorn, though, we will start there on the individuals, starting with Lloyd Meek, who broke his own hit-out record yet again, getting 59 hit-outs, 15 of them to advantage, and 20 disposals, 14 contested possessions, 4 marks, 5 clearances, 10 score involvements, 6 tackles, 17 pressure strikes, and 2 1%ers. Recruit Josh Battle was elite in defense against his old side. He finished with 23 touches, 21 of them effective, equating to 91.3% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 9 intercepts, 7 marks, 9 pressure strikes, 7 1%ers, and 4 spoils. I also just want to give a brief shout out to Tom Barras as well for having a solid performance. Those 2 recruits have definitely finally gelling really well together in that defensive line, and it's been really good to see. And then Big Marby Ochol had a solid forward performance, even though he did get held fairly well by Caminiti. He kicked 2-2 from 7 disposals, 6 contested possessions, 5 score involvements, 5 tackles, 16 pressure acts, and 4 ground ball gets. St Kilda, Max Hall stepped up as leading scorer, as we've kind of already talked about. He kicked 3-1 from 27 touches, 19 of them effective, equating to 70.4% efficiency, 13 contested possessions, 6 marks, 6 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 9 score involvements, 4 tackles, 24 pressure acts, 11 ground ball gets, and 587 meters gained. But Isaiah Wanganeen Millera, immense amount of ball movement this week. He collected 43 disposals, 29 of them effective, equating to 67.4% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 6 marks, 8 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 3 behinds. Should have been goals, to be honest, but you know how it is. 11 score involvements, 10 pressure acts, 10 ground ball gets, and 1,010 meters gained. absolutely elite
That's a lot
stuff
of
from him,
meterage.
and
Yeah.
they need to keep him. But no doubt about it, they need to lock him down. He's so important
Yeah.
to their defensive line right now.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's so hard though, because it's like, one of the Saints' biggest problem is that they're so unwilling at times to not go the long kick
Oh,
down the line.
very true.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a lot Wangani Malira does, but it's like, if you're going to do that, like, Wangani Malira is one of the players. So
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, as you say, you just keep Wangani Malira and then just work out how you shape ahead of the ball. And obviously, what's hurt is obviously the Brad Hill being so in and out of the side. Obviously, you sort of, you know, move on for him eventually, but you know what I mean? It's like, here's the other player that can sort of do that, provides a bit more direct dash, sort of that middle ground option. But yeah, as I said, it's yeah, as I said, it just gets a bit thin because, as I said, until that ball gets forward, their wingers don't tend to do that much.
Well, obviously everyone knows about the rumor of TDK potentially going to St Kilda. What would he really like? Obviously they have Rowan Marshall, who's very 50-50 as a rock. What would TDK fix in like this sort of lineup?
Yeah, well, the thing about Rowan Marshall is he's not really mobile. He's forward half mobile, and what I mean by that is that he can run for half the ground, and they work around that. With TDK, he can definitely have a bit more impact, and he may be the player where, like, for a long kick that Wangani Malira tends to go for, he'll be the option that's actually willing to run to a bit above, therefore, provide a lead up target, maybe hit a few people deep. So then you got to decide, oh, well, the defender I'm going to put on, am I going to actually play like a, well, in instance for this game, you would be deciding whether you put Sicily on him. He's like, you know, his forms are like, well, do we have Sicily come up the ground, get into the position where it's less likely to go to? But then it means you don't ever put Tom Barassa on him. So if he does go deep forward, you know what I mean? He gets a bit of an easier forward matchup. So yeah, as I said, I think offensively, again, it just adds to that offensive creativity. Rowan Marshall, he's good for a couple of goals here and there. But yeah, as I said, I think that they would be looking for a TDK as a utility, Marshall as a primary tap ruck work, and then if Marshall is having an off game, you can sort of change up the tap work.
If they plan on if they're able to keep both, then I think that's definitely the way they should go. I agree with that.
Yeah. I remember Carlton played Pitnet and TDK this week.
True.
Albeit mixed effect, but they still do it quite often.
This is true. This is very true. And then on the injury front, Jimmy Webster came off with a calf issue. You know, one of their veterans. That might take a little bit to heal, but it's not too bad in that case. All right. Next on our list is our Sunday games. There are only two. We're going up to the SCG for this one, where the Swans host the Dockers. But before we do that, we need to touch on another retirement that happened last week with Michael Sonny Walters.
Yeah, and honestly, if I was more prepared for this, I would have my Sonny Walters bobblehead. I say mine as a present for my dad. But he is the only player that I've ever owned in bobblehead form, so that's sad in that regard. It's also sad because, honestly, I think people forget how good he was when Freo's forward line was absolute garbage tier. This is in like the mid 2000s, where he would be playing games, scoring about, being leading goal scorer. He averaged, I think he got to 40 goals in a year a couple of times. Looking at this, he did in 2015 and 2019. So yeah, occasionally led the goal scoring, always providing a bit, even in 2023, where he looked a bit cooked beforehand. Came up with a bit of a revival season where he scored 33. But yeah, as I said, just known for his craft, more specifically, when he wasn't getting the ball, he was always involved in score involvements. He could be put into the midfielder. He was a pretty underrated clearance player, whether it being directly at centre bounce or for forward stoppages. And you would just have to give him a lot of respect because the minute you sort of been like, oh, is that a quiet game? He would always bob up in bits and pieces, do what he needs to do, and can score quite quickly on him. He was a very late round. He was a very pro player. Technically made his debut in 2009. So he's made a couple of decades in terms of, obviously 2000s, 2011s, 2024s, 20 whatevers, you know what I mean. And yeah, so it's like for an often injured player, he's got quite a bit of longevity. Freo just had to work around, obviously, his soft tissue injuries, which sort of plagued him, prevent him from being a 250 player. But yeah, as I said, good forward pressure as well. Tackling was an underrated aspect of his game, especially, as I mentioned, in that like late 2000s era where the Dockers were struggling for. He would just be putting so much effort into generating as much as he could in that forward line. So, yeah, honestly, sometimes that small forward role, you don't like think as creative, and it felt like a spark at times. I definitely think there was a very, you wouldn't call it gritting grind, but an always running, always at the game, which just made him the complete small forward.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of those players where he was just an inspiration to a ton of the players currently in the AFL. Obviously, like being Indigenous, that's so important in the sport to where it reaches such a wider array of communities, like especially up in the Northern Territory, and like the top WA, where you can where the kids up there are very inspired by a lot of these players, that it can just come in, be absolutely elite from the get-go despite injuries plaguing them throughout their careers, and just become just an all-time hero to some of the players coming into the game, like Isaiah Dudley for an example. That's
and honestly,
he's the type of player that I think would model himself after Michael Walters.
And honestly, I can think you can almost see some of that veteran influence, because one of the things I've been fairly impressed with these small forwards, and not just Dudley, it's obviously Murphy Reid, of course, is that when they're not exactly having the best game or they're not imposing, they are still doing the small things, whether that's positioning, whether that's laying tackles or chase downs in their forward 50. They always seem to be doing the right things. So I know the Dockers forward line has been very up and down, but honestly, I do feel like there may be a bit of Sonny Walters' influence that is leading those two players to be, by, like as I said, the average small forward. You know what I mean? It's like they're not going to get 30 goals, even some of the best ones. And Murphy Reid's done that already. Dudley's probably looking to be somewhere between 15 and 20. It's still very useful. But unfortunately, the flip side of that is with those two going well, not that much need for Michael Walters to be on the list. Obviously, even though they're retired, if massive injuries struck, I'm sure he could actually put the boots on again. But yeah, as I said, there's no need right now. Honestly, it just feels like a good place to leave that forward line. You know what I mean? So a bit like I was going to say Duggan. Dom Sheed.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously Dom Sheed was less influential, but it just seems like the right time to step away from the game. But obviously for Sonny Walters, a lot of good memories. Won't forget some of his play for a long time. And you know what I mean? He's been a part of some good Fremantle sides, been a part of some bad Fremantle sides, but what he's been able to produce has been very consistent for a very long time.
Absolutely. 239 games, 365 goals, and a ton of honours and accolades to go alongside that. such as second in the 2019 Best and Fairest, third in the 2016 Best and Fairest, All Australian in 2019, made the All Australian squad of 44 in 2013, leading goal kicker for Fremantle in 2013, 15, 16, 18, and 19, and got over 49 votes in the Brownlow medal in total career votes.
Yeah. As I said, you forget how, like, you don't think of Sonny Walters as like a typical player that would lead it, but to do that week in, week out, with not that many tall support, because remember, once Pavlich went off, like, you didn't have that big consistent forward bringing ball to ground. You had to deal with a lot of chop and change in terms of tall players that are bringing the ball to ground. So the fact that he was able to still consistently get it, you know, honestly, I've watched the Dockers week in, week out for a long time. You're just amazed how some players just intuitively know the right place to be, when to stick inside the contest. And yeah, he just had that intuition, had that game sense, had that knowledge to always be in the best position for his club.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the fact that he had to go from like the Pavlich era to now the Tracy and Amos era of tall forwards to Rover under. Like, it was definitely a harder transition period, because when you have someone like Pav to work alongside, like one of the best tall forwards to ever play the game, like it is definitely one of those harder sort of transitions, because you're always so used to getting good ball at ground level, and then you go to a situation where you're up against with more developing talls. It takes a lot longer.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of talls that were in between. Like,
yeah, I know. Like, there was a hard couple of years in there.
Kepler Bradley. I don't think he played with Scotty Gumbleton, but he might have. There's one other, Travis Collier, who was, I guess, a bit more medium. Still sort of had to work with. Again, not big names, though. So the fact that, you know, he was able to actually generate the bulk of so long. Yeah, that's an absolute testament to him.
Absolutely. And like, just on the topic of like inspiring a future generation, I think another player who definitely took a lot of inspiration from Walters was Shea Bolton as well. Even though Shea is more of a midfielder than a forward, I think it's just the way that he plays, the way he's been light on his feet and able to get through traffic really easily is definitely something that like Walters was always able to do when he was fully fit.
And I think even just that crafty small forward playing in the centre bounces, you know what I mean? I think they approach it the same way, where it's like, okay, you're literally just playing offense. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, if they're going to actually have to pay and respect you, because if you win the ball, it's going towards, and if not, we should make it up with the rest of our, midfield structures. Because you obviously have to put the right setup for that sort of thing. But you could tell the impact when Walters was getting the centre bounces. He had some pretty nice clearances back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And other players, you know, probably modelled a bit. Cosy Pickett's another one that I think is a good example of using some of that forward craft and forward stoppage works in the actual centre bounce.
Yeah, agreed. Like Pickett, especially with this season, like Pickett's clearance work in that midfield forward line has been phenomenal when he's been on.
Arguably could be Melbourne's best midfielder, really.
Considering how the rest of them were early in the season, I would say that's pretty much a given. But yes, we salute you, Michael Sonny Walters. I hope you enjoy your retirement, and well, first of all, get over the knee injury that's been plaguing you, and then enjoy your retirement post footy. But we do still have 2 more matches to cover. Jumping back over to the SCG, where the Swans hosted said Dockers.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's hard to be too harsh. And I know I said before about just winning when you don't look that great. Dockers have done that for 6 weeks. They finally got to catch up, I think. And they might find themselves a bit unlucky. Sydney's been very up and down, but the 2 times that faced them, they've had a lot more players and looked a lot less trash than they have been at various points in the season. So maybe a bit unlucky considering, but on the flip side, I think Freo have a fair few concerns from this game. The majority one, and it's been talked about a bit, was how much their midfield leaked from stoppages. Honestly, it wasn't the only thing. I think a lot of matchups, Freo just flat out lost. Again, we're talking about the midfield matchups. Heaney had an absolute day. Warner had an absolute field day. And obviously the biggest one being James Jordan, absolutely shutting down Sarong in the first half and still managing to kick 2 very important goals. A part of the midfield domination allowed McLean and Amadi to take some from lead up, kept them ticking. They had a few goals, sort of allowed them to, although Freo, I don't think they're defensively weak. It did allow for them to beat their direct opponents in a couple of goals. And, you know, even, you know, I know Papley got injured early, or even able to, I think this was more just Sydney being well, convert some of the tougher general play goals that Freo allowed. I don't really fault the defense all too much from that. Maybe a bit on the stoppage work, but they were getting that, which was funny because the only 15-meter out kick that they were able to manage from this game, they ended up missing. That was Will Hayward from a general shot play. So it was one of those convert the hard ones, miss a few of the easy ones. But yeah, as I said, there was more than that. On the outside, they were absolutely smashed. Wagner was probably one of their best players for Fremantle. Still got absolutely touched up by Errol Goulden.
Yep.
You know, forward line just wasn't functioning. Again, still baffling to me. And this is well, despite all this, you know, despite a lot of their, you know, faults, their forwards just know when to kick goals, and it's kept them in a lot of. Maybe it's a crutch, but it also kept them within 11 points and making this game fairly winnable because, like, on paper, they were just not really in this contest.
Yeah.
But, you know, Tracy bobs up, Jackson bobs up, Amos, all score at important times. I know Amos has a bad season, but he's from, you know, a game where he did pretty much nothing, still pretty good. Despite mostly being beaten, the few possessions that Brayshaw and Sarong got offered some smooth moments of play. And, you know, even though Freo refused to work the ball on the outside, they went direct to Kilda. I did feel like O'Driscoll tried his hardest, either as, like, presenting leads, even if Freo didn't acknowledge them, or just, like, filling the spaces, getting involved in transition when they eventually went to him. But at the end of the day, a lot of Sydney's hard work just provided a lot better system. They never fell behind at score at any point, despite Freo keeping themselves in the game.
Yep.
And they just flat out deserve to win because they are playing decent football.
They are. This is very true. Like, this is the type of brand of footy, and we spoke about this last week. This is the brand of footy that we've been wanting Sydney to, like, we wanted to see Sydney play all season long. Like, they played in the grand final in 2024, and yeah, whilst they did lose that pretty miserably, like, they should have still been able to kind of keep this like decent, you know, performance that got them there in the first place into this season. It didn't happen for a multitude of reasons. You know, new coach, maybe a new game plan, a bunch of injuries to start the season definitely didn't help them either. You know, obviously they didn't have Goulden or Papley for a solid half of the season, and, you know, them only just coming back has, especially Goulden, has improved them like tenfold, really.
Even I feel like Jake Lloyd's played tenfold better.
Jake Lloyd has definitely like stepped up massively since coming back too. Like, they have had a ton of injuries that they've slowly been able to work back in, and it has really put them back to where they should have been at the start with you know, with the 2024
and
run.
It's like the only thing you really say is their forward line, but I honestly think Hayden McLean sort of put his head back up a bit. Obviously, Marty should have had that game against Port Adelaide where he missed. Did very well otherwise. Even in this game, unfortunately injured, but a couple of nice goals to keep them, ticking along. Where, as I said, like, it feels a lot different from the Sydney side that was just relying on, like, as I said, this is structure. more than just, you know what I mean, just praying that their forwards come up and are able to kick goals.
Yeah,
This seems much more able to be replicated along a bigger period of time.
Yeah, this feels like a much more solid sort of execution plan of how they want to be able to transition the ball from their midfield to their forward line, and their forwards having a much better impact.
Even just in comparison to Fremantle, like Fremantle seems a lot more flaky as it is. Like, as I said, their scoring really hasn't paid off. They just have not looked that coherent in the forward half. It's been a lot of individual efforts, especially from their top. Not saying it's like not being able to fix, but again, the onus is a bit on Fremantle. They are the team probably most at risk of not getting that final spot. So even though they won that 6 games, even though they deserve their due, unfortunately, the onus is still on Freo to create a bit more, because otherwise I could definitely, despite having a pretty solid year.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, it's honest, looking at it, the reality of it is that it's either going to be the Dockers or probably the Suns missing out on finals. Like, it's still very much that 50-50. I think the Suns have a pretty solid run home, and they should make it, quote unquote, should. But again, it's just one of those things where, like, it's really hard to really 100% count them in just because it's the Suns.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas
a few tough games.
Freo are definitely much more liable to dropping out and staying out. But
I think when I looked at it, the strength of schedule for Freo and the Suns and Hawthorn are roughly the.
Yeah, they've got a couple easy games, couple of hard games.
Bulldogs have a few harder games, but they get a lot of home, and the GWS Giants just have a bit of a softer run because they had a pretty hard opening end of the fixture.
That's true. But we'll jump over to Sydney specifically now and talk about their individuals, starting with Brodie Grundy, who, as we talked about earlier in the episode, who is having
massive turnaround.
One hell of a turnaround. He's continued to be one of the best rucks in the competition right now. He finished with 33 hitouts, 9 to advantage, and kicked a goal from 20 disposals, 14 of them effective, equating to 70% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 12 clearances, 8 score involvements, 5 tackles, 8 pressure acts, 3 1%ers. Sam Wicks moved the ball well. Just, someone who we've kind of been a little bit dour on when he's come into the side, but he's been a lot better over the past couple of weeks, especially as Sydney has improved. He finished with 14 disposals, 12 effective, equating to 85.7% efficiency, 4 marks, 3 inside 50s, 4 score enrollments, 8 pressure acts, 616 meters gained. And then the Pelican, Lewis Melican, who we love to talk about, he had a very solid outing this week, collecting 12 disposals, 10 of them effective, equating to 83.3% efficiency, 4 contested possessions, 6 intercepts, 7 marks, 2 score involvements, 6 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 4 spoils. Over on the Fremantle side of things, Matt Johnson performed well. He finished with 20 touches, 16 of them effective, equating to 80% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 3 marks, 4 inside 50s, 5 clearances, a behind, 6 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, 6 scramble gets, and 423 meters gained. And then Andy Brayshaw also had a solid performance, collecting 24 disposals, 19 of them effective, equating to 79.2% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 4 marks, 4 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 6 score involvements, 3 tackles, 21 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, and 401 meters gained. And on the injury front, just Tom Papley with another hamstring issue. Hopefully it won't take too long for him to recover from that, because Sydney definitely need him in terms of, potentially upsetting a couple more teams that are looking to vie for that final spot.
Yeah, and I will say the final thing about this game is that the thing that you are concerned about with Freo is clearly stoppages. Because we know their midfield, again, at the top, absolutely fantastic. Brayshaw, one of the better midfield seasons on stat-wise.
I think...
Sarong, even though he's had a few games minimized.
Overall, I think Brayshaw is probably their best midfielder all season, realistically.
I mean, he's their best midfielder. I just mean he would be a top 10 midfielder.
Oh, yeah.
This year.
Competition-wise, I think, agreed.
Yeah, and then, so they have a few players step down. You talked about Matt Johnson. He's actually having a better back half of the year. You know what I mean? Jago O'Meara pops up every now and then. Obviously they've got the Darcy. But then you look at this game. Score source from stoppages. 9-6 60 to Sydney to just 2 goals Fremantle. When it goes wrong, and I personally think it's more of a coaching thing. It was 41 to 32 clearances, so obviously Sydney had more, but it was still quite the apparent 5-2 goals leaked from centre bounce. Freo, their 2 goals actually did come from bounce. So, yeah, it's just a bit concerning because, yeah, as I said, it's one of those things where I don't think you think Fremantle being a heavy finals contender until they patch it up, because obviously, especially in finals, you're probably going to. Freo were actually one of the better teams for not getting conceded from turnover. They're very.
Yeah.
But we've seen a lot of teams that are like that. They go to finals, they make a few more errors, and they just. And you can't have a midfield unit that fickle with that amount of quality. Like, it's almost like a Carlton, really, where you've got a lot of players, they producing good stats. It should look good, but then you get some horrendous fors and against in terms of stoppage scores. So it's the biggest thing that Freo got. As I said, it's a lot forward of the ball. They're back up. And the defense has looked a bit shaky over these weeks, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's still what you think is the backbone of the team. Again, probably don't utilize the outside as much. Like, they got some good outside movers that aren't involved in the game. We've seen Jeremy Sharp drop to the outside on this team.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan O'Driscoll takes his place, but again, works hard, not always utilized. And yeah, as I said, just a few things that didn't happen, like Jordan Clark. You mentioned Sam Wicks. Is like we mentioned last week about what do you say? Possibly tagging him. Not Sam Wicks. Who am I talking about?
Was it Golden?
In the forward line.
No,
it wasn't Golden. Like, it was whoever was running. Braden Campbell.
That's
Braden
right.
Campbell.
Yes.
He was running with Clark, and he wasn't really tagging him. Like, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but you know what I mean? He was just absolutely shut down, and Campbell still had a fairly good, like, didn't score much himself, but was involved in score involvement. So, sometimes it just takes an honest performance, and I've mentioned that a few times during the year. You can tag as heavy as you like. I like the tagging option, but sometimes it's just like, okay, put a player, don't always don't always try and create mismatches. Sometimes, you've just got to have it. And if you trust your player to win out, it can have a tenfold benefit to your team. But what you obviously don't do is you always have to have your backup plan just in case it doesn't work. And obviously for Freo, when I'm talking about the midfield, they just, a lot of the time, they just didn't have plan B. It was either win or get spanked. And so they got absolutely trashed in some of the individual performances. Honestly, this game was a lot closer than it really should have been. Which, take that as a positive or a negative, but yeah.
Yeah, no,
It is what it is.
I agree. Like, this should have been, realistically, Sydney should have like put them away like ages ago. We did that game, but instead, like, just there was just something about Freo that kind of kept them back in it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
honestly, I think it was just good goal kicking.
What,
like, Sydney actually did pretty well.
Something I think Freo definitely need to work on is, well, one thing I do like about the whole tagging aspect is that it adds an extra facet of strategy, not just from a player being the tagger or the player getting tagged, but it's how you deal with that tag. How do you shake the tag? How do you use a loose player to shake the tag off? Do you just have to try and like run from it, put extra pressure on the tagger himself? Something like that. It's similar to how a lot of forwards and a lot of like full forwards and a lot of full backs will get 2-on-1 when it comes to contests rather than being pure 1-on-1s. Obviously, Tom Lynch has been a big proponent, or not big proponent, but like has had a lot of issues against 2-on-1s this season. Way back in the day, I know Alex Rance had a lot of issues with 2-on-1s and full backs, and that's something that he also had to deal with during his career. But it's one of those sort of extra aspects of the game that really becomes a coaching issue, and how you coach your
Yeah,
players to strategize around those sorts of
and
situations.
I guess the point is like for Frio, it's like what happens if you tag Sarong? Matt Johnson gets a few more possessions. Again, solid game, probably one of the better games he's had this year, but he still doesn't impact that much. You know what I mean? It's not going to burn you. Like the net, it's still a net positive. Andy Brayshaw, he's gotten a few more possessions, but like he didn't really, he wasn't like a foot to the throat player. You know what I mean? He didn't win that many clearances. In fact, Johnson actually got more clearances than Brayshaw did. But you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, as I said, they just don't have enough clearance punishers. When it's going well, they win a healthy amount. But it's a big drop off to what was one of the best winning teams. So I think teams have found out how to frame the contest and expose Fremantle. And the biggest problem is last year they were winning contests, clearances, and scoring from them. Whereas this year they're losing the contest, not scoring from them, and they're still very porous. Like last year they got scored against stoppage as well, but it didn't matter as much because they were getting as much. Whereas this year it's a bit of a one-way street.
Yeah.
If you put like a midfield ranking, even though a lot of Fremantle players are playing quite well, I would put Fremantle in the bottom 6 maybe in terms of midfields.
Yeah, it's not an ideal. I mean, they have, again, solid players, but it's not an ideal situation
Yeah.
to be in for Fremantle right now.
In terms of structures, in terms of like the pluses and the minuses, like they clearly give up more than they're producing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Speaking of a team that gives up more than they're producing, we're talking about Melbourne next, but they're not the
Yeah.
ones hosting. It is the Adelaide Crows hosting at the Adelaide Oval. Obviously hosting the Demons.
Yeah, and it was a very much a yo-yo game. I didn't watch this. I saw a bit of the score go up and down watching the Freo game, but it was like an interesting thing that was like not a bit like the St Kilda Hawthorn game. You know what I mean? Adelaide won, but it was
It
like,
should have been a bigger margin,
yeah,
to be honest.
could have. I mean, Melbourne were honestly good for parts of this game. Start off poor goal kicking both sides. Forget the first quarter. That was just both teams would say that was atrocious. Um, but Melbourne got a bit going. They got Van Rooyen in, Melksham and Pickett. Again, talking about his midfield performance. When Pickett's in the midfield, they just seem to have more creative clearances, and when they do that, Melbourne can score a bit. But geez, when it goes bad for them, and I mentioned this, like they just defensively break down a bit too much. And Adelaide were able to flip the script. It was spurred on by Isaac Rankin, of all people. Well, not of all people. You can dominate a game, but you know what I mean. The Tolls didn't really get involved as much as you might think. I actually think Stephen May had a bit of a redeemer game compared to last few weeks where I've been slagging him.
Yeah, I definitely think he performed a little bit better this week than previous.
Yeah, but as I said, it was sort of weird because like a lot of the play was dictated by midfield, but unfortunately for both teams, it was more which midfield wasn't turning the ball over as much. Or when I say that, I mean like halfback midfield sort of transition. As we know, Adelaide they love to score from turnover; they're set up for that. I don't think they wanted to concede as much as they did in this game, and it left the door ajar for Melbourne. They did stage a late come, but they just didn't get enough entries. Adelaide win a scrappy game. Again, repeated as a lot with this week for the teams that kept it. Because, like, as we said on paper, all matches probably could have been absolute flogging. But, as I said, this was just the scrappy of the game that they needed to win. But yeah, as I said, in terms of Melbourne at least, their defense, they have to defend a lot of turnovers, but they still managed to be okay, force Adelaide to take some of their set shots from a bit of a tougher position. And yeah, it was just like I think Melbourne's outside game also just was a bit, probably a bit more consistent than Adelaide's. Adelaide's was last week. I think this week only Dan Curtin, I sure, was a bit of a standout.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was the inside. It was a bit opposite. Adelaide's inside was very good, but they're a bit lacking. Melbourne's inside midfield was a bit lacking, but the outside movement was pretty good. Cosy Pickett and apparently Viney were okay at the centre bounce, but again, it was just a bit of a nothing game from them in that regard, and it was sort of a game where didn't really have the best game. He was sort of nullified by Rolly O'Brien. Yes. I think that really helped Adelaide, and it was just enough for them to win out, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I was looking at this, going through the stats and stuff for this, like the fact that O'Brien and Gawn were really, really well matched, kind of tells me that it was very much not really a midfield game this week. Like it felt much more just pure forward kind of pure forward craft going at each other, because like obviously you expect players like your Petrakas and your Olivers to really get more involved, but they were very 50-50. As you like, Pickett was kind of the main standout. Trent Rivers had a decent game as well. But Viney had a solid pressure game. I did want to mention him, but I didn't. But he did do fairly well for the most part in terms of his pressure. Obviously, in terms of ball movement, not so much. But yeah, it's just
I think Trent. Yeah, I think Trent Rivers played a bit more outside game, because I looked at his heat. Fanfooty actually has the heat map, so I can actually be a bit more accurate when I say like wing possessions or halfback. It was sort of a mix between wing and halfback, so that's what I'm saying. Melbourne just looked a lot better on the outside, than they did the inside. Apart from maybe Viney and Cosy Pickett, the highlights I saw, he was very creative with some of his clearance work,
as he normally is. But just on the Adelaide front, this was definitely one of those games that, in terms of staying true to keeping in touch with top four, like this is one that they needed to win. Percentage wise, I think they're sitting pretty good, so they don't really need to worry too much about that right now. But the 4 points definitely makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's just like for Adelaide, it's like 3-4 from stoppages compared to 3-3, pretty null and void. But you know what I mean? Is the flip side of that is just so much score. 9-8, 62 for Adelaide off turnovers. 7-6, 48 for Melbourne. So, as I said, considering that most of the score origin was forward half for both teams scored 54 from forward half. You know what I mean? Like sometimes a game is literally coming down to, is your back half turning the ball over a bit more than your opponent? Yes, no, win, lose,
Yeah.
That. Very reductive, but it felt like, from what I gather from this game, again, I didn't watch it or
I watched a bit of it, but you're about right with your assumptions.
Yeah, it just seemed, from what I gather, to be a very affair. That's more just a team being slightly cleaner with their opportunities in Adelaide.
Yeah, that's right. But jumping over to our individuals now, and I start with Sam Berry for the Crows. He was very solid with pressure this week, finishing with 16 disposals, 12 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 2 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 4 score involvements, 9 tackles, 23 pressure acts, and 10 ground ball gets. Isaac Rankin was lethal up forward, kicking 5-1 from 16 touches. Like the whole reason, honestly, that Adelaide kind of won this was he had a very, very impressive performance pushing up from that midfield into the forward line. He was pretty much their backbone this week. Again, 16 touches, 14 of them effective, equating to 87.5% efficiency. 10 contested possessions, 4 marks with 3 of them inside 50, 3 inside 50s overall, 2 clearances, 7 score involvements, 4 tackles, 16 pressure acts, and 322 meters gained. Jake Saligo had another fantastic outing. He collected 21 disposals, 18 of them effective, equating to 85.7% efficiency. 9 contested possessions, 6 marks, 5 inside 50s, 6 clearances, 5 score involvements, 6 tackles, 26 pressure acts, 393 meters gained. And then over on the Melbourne front, Cade Chandler put on immense pressure. He finished with 18 touches, 14 of them effective, equating to 77.8% efficiency. 8 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 2 inside 50s, 4 score involvements, 10 tackles, and 19 pressure acts. And then Trent Rivers stood tall when possible. He kicked 1-1 from 23 disposals, 19 of them effective, equating to 82.6% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 5 marks, 7 score involvements, 10 pressure acts, 81% 6 spoils, and 492 meters gained. On the injury front, Josh Rochelle went out with a knee. It is confirmed to not be an ACL, thankfully.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty rough, as they don't entirely know 100% what he has done. So they can't entirely rule out if he'll play finals or not. That's a wait and see at this point in time. We'll find out more news sometime this week, I assume.
I mean, it's weird. Like, as I said, it could be a whole range of things. Like, it could just be really bad bruising. Which, I mean, it doesn't sound bad, but like when you realize that AFL requires a lot of running and a lot of use of your knees, that can still put you out for a fair chunk of time. So,
yeah, it can.
Again, I think finals is just what you hope Rochelle returns for.
Yeah, like if he might get lucky and have to play and like come back fit a little bit earlier than expected, and just to ensure like he's right to go, they might put him in the sandful for a little bit, like just for like half a game or something.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's just a wait and see on him. As for the MRO front, Markeen was fined $1,000 for striking Jake Melksham. Wasn't too much in it. $1,000 is perfectly fine, and that wraps up round 17. So
I may have been a bit out of it. Did we not have careless contact with the umpire this week?
I don't think we did. I just realized that myself. We actually got 1 week without the umpires being touched.
Even though Matt Rowell did his hardest to try and put it a bit. I mean, that's a bit baffling to me how they're going to be so stubborn on like, oh, I'm not going to change a thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, man. As I said, you know where the umpire's going to run back every centre down.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I think players should have a bit more duty of care. But
agreed.
I mean,
In that regard, it's all on the players. If it's just in the general field of play, it's on both.
Yeah, I mean, you might be a bit unlucky, but as I said, but yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, anyway, we won't get too much into that. It's been enough conversation, I suppose, on that. So,
absolutely. I just want to also mention the fact that you did not say any of the scores during those games, so I'm going to disregard it for the week.
Yeah, no, I like got halfway through and realized it, and I'm in too deep. Nice. We'll call this a loss. Honestly, that's just an L for me.
That's all right. Everyone knows who won, who lost. It's not too big of a deal.
Yeah, it's the age of the internet. Look it up yourself.
Anyway, we're jumping over to the round 18 fixture now, starting on a Thursday night game. I don't know why Carlton keep getting these blockbuster positions, but it's Carlton and Brisbane at Marvel Stadium.
You remember that when Carlton fans had hope?
Well, yeah, but by the time that the second half of the season was figured out, we already knew they were going to be bad. So.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, I think this is part of the scheduling because it's post bye, wasn't it?
Yes,
that correct. They do the. Yeah, okay.
It's a quote unquote floating fixture. So.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said, it will still get good TV ratings. It will still be represented at the ground probably. But,
oh yeah.
Oh, it's ominous for Carlton. They have not looked good at all. And Brisbane have shown signs of being ruthless. I'm going to guess that they may have some pretty solid back-end performances from here on in, if my suspicions are correct, which is bad for Carlton. They've got to be a lot more defensively accountable in midfield, but inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, Brisbane's going to tear into shreds. Defensively, they probably want to look at, just trying to win on the matchups. They can defend the Brisbane Tolls in terms of Logan Morris and Eric Hipwood.
They can.
So, just try and win that. Try not to let transition, and then you could minimize the damage. But yeah, as I said, despite me criticizing Brisbane's defense against Port, and that's only a minor criticism anyway. The way Carlton approach, they're just going to stuff around in the forward line. They'll turn it over. They're not the best ball youth team, and Brisbane will just smash them on counter attack. I reckon this will be like Brisbane. You know what? We're going to go early because my prediction last week was well off.
True.
So I reckon Brisbane score 80 from turnover. We're going bold this week.
Specifically from turnover?
Well, 80 plus, I should say, specifically from turnovers.
All right. All right. Well, we will take that bet. But obviously, in
Yeah.
terms of tipping,
Well, not a
Brisbane
bet. I'm not putting anything
by
on the line.
far.
I'm wrong half the week. I'll be broke.
Yeah, true. Very true. But yes, Brisbane for our tips by far. Easily probably the safest tip of the week. Whereas a couple of the games coming up, potentially all coin flip games. It's looking very, very spicy this week. Starting off with our Friday night game, up on the Gold Coast where the Suns host Collingwood.
Top 8 implications. Obviously, for Collingwood, if they drop this game, it doesn't mean anything for them.
Correct.
You'd think that first is very much in the bag, and second would be, the worst case scenario, which is still a home game.
Mm-hmm.
As for the Suns, if they win this, their percentage to actually make the 8 skyrockets up. It's in their wheelhouse. The question is, though, will, as I mentioned, Collingwood, they score a lot from turnovers. Suns score a lot from turnovers, but I think the difference between the two teams is like structurally, Collingwood are more sound, pretty much all around. And I think the Suns are, decently sound in most areas. Defense has probably had a bit of a trade-off from last year to attack. But again, as I mentioned with the Suns, they still have a bit of problems trying to create normal conventional attack. So again, it depends on how aggressive they want to get. Collingwood love teams being aggressive to them, so that probably is the worst matchup in terms of it's the biggest thing against them in this game. But I do think if they can create a few opportunities, they've proven they're able to score pretty healthily. And I do think they have a chance if it is up. I don't think they'll win this game without conceding a few. I do think this might be a run with game. It's a bit of a shootout. But yeah, if it ends up Collingwood just down.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's it's an uphill battle, but I think for the Suns, it's a very good litmus test. This will definitely be a test your mettle because it won't be easy.
No, absolutely
how
not.
decently they're going this season.
I think a lot of it will come down to, it's usually always going to be a midfield battle or a battle out of turnovers. But you look at the forward lines, and the Collingwood just have a far better forward line, by far. So the Suns are gonna have to really.
It's a lot more balanced now with McStay and Membry.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Suns are gonna have to really rely on making sure that their transitions into their forward 50, whether it's a long bomb, whether it's a short kick, are accurate, and they land with successful marks and don't get caught up by Collingwood's defense, because otherwise Collingwood are just going to eat them alive. Yeah. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, they can't fully go weight of numbers approach in this game, because then, as I said, they're not going to fully, as I said, I don't think they'll it's easy to say, just don't do all the good at night, because, the way Collingwood play, they bait some of this stuff. But I think it's just certain areas. They've got to make sure they don't all of Collingwood's traps, because then, as I said, it won't be close. But if they can, find a game plan, and I think it will be aggressively attacking the turnover. I think that's just the way they're going to do it. I could see scenarios where they keep with it. I don't think it will just be a fully outclassed scenario, but unfortunately, there's just a few more pathways where Collingwood end up winning quite comfortably.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely could see the upset happening, but it's going to be really hard for the Suns to pull off. So I definitely think leaning towards Collingwood is the safer option, if you're tipping, of course. But stranger things have happened. All right, jumping over to our Saturday matchup. So we start at Marvel Stadium, where the Bulldogs host the Adelaide Crows.
This is a tough one. Adelaide sort of got their minor upset on the Western Bulldogs last year at Adelaide Oval. I vaguely remember that because Adelaide were looking pretty trash, and the Bulldogs just do what they do and randomly lose
Yep, that's
I
about
think
right.
yeah. But as like with both teams showing a reasonable amount of consistency and both teams being very offensively based this year, like this could be another double hundred game. Maybe that should have been what I put my thing on, but I'm already committed to whatever I said
Well,
earlier.
we both know that these
Um,
teams can be really efficient sharpshooters. So you're not
yeah,
wrong in
well,
the
that's the
fact that it could
thing.
be high scoring.
It's just like, well, it's clear, like, Bulldogs just don't have the defense to defend all three of the Adelaide's top forwards.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's true.
again, will Bulldogs get enough territory and will Adelaide create enough meterage from the turnovers they'll be able to produce? Again, Bulldogs not even that great back half team. Obviously, Bailey Dale's really good. But you know what I mean? It's like he can't get every possession in the back half, and even then, he has like a reasonable amount of turnovers per game.
Yeah.
It's just again a great marking present, and B overall a very good mover of the ball still. So yeah, as I said, it's just yeah, again, it'll just be fun to see which team gets their game going. I'm not really sure how we just tip Adel. I might tip the Bulldogs. Is that
The
Bulldogs
dogs are
Oval,
favorited because it
Marvel
is at
Stadium?
Marvel. So
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I definitely think it's
I
definitely
just
going to be a battle of the
yeah.
whether what team
I have
can
reservations about the
hold the
Dogs,
forwards.
but I definitely do think they can pinch a game off Adelaide. I think it'll be close, but again, I don't. I just think it's like one of those games where I don't think scoreline matters as much. It's like how much time of possession, or periods of dominance you get. Because as I said, like those periods of dominance could be like 6 or 7 goals in a very short amount of time,
Yeah.
and it might just be like that 6 or 7 goal is the separation. But it might not be reflective of the entire match.
Yeah, agreed. I'm currently leading dogs, but this is the very coin flip kind of matchup as well. So,
Yeah,
we haven't really seen much of Adelaide kind of performing under the roof. Like they haven't really come here all that much this season. So it could be like a really good testament
mm.
as to how they perform in completely dry conditions.
Well, they
Um,
should favor them.
they
They've
should
got a
definitely
good
favor
tall
them,
forward
especially
line.
when you're running a tall
Yeah,
forward line. But will the loss of Rochelle hurt them that much? I would like to hope not, but he has been that good that
yeah.
it
Well,
is
as I
one of those.
said,
He is one
though,
of those sorts of players that really does kind of make or
yeah,
break.
he would have benefited. Bulldogs aren't that defensive on the outside, so yeah, as I said, uh, they'll be looking to get a few more of the outside options. Yeah, it was a bit weird. Sam Berry, he played inside midfield this week, but he could go back on the outside. He's normally fairly good on the outside, generating offense. So
Mm.
we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. All right, jumping over to our next Saturday game up at NG Stadium where the Giants host Geelong.
Again, it's man, obviously it's hard to say no to Geelong at this point in the season. They did have that random bad game against Brisbane, where they, just muffed a lot of shots. But yeah, it's again, GWS, they're not a defensive team anymore as well. They've been lacking, obviously, still missing Sam Taylor,
If
so they're going to struggle.
Buckley doesn't get up for this week, that's going to hurt them even more.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously they tick on that, but again, they haven't really been that bothered by not being a defensive team. Uh, and they definitely have the firepower. It's going to be a territory battle, but these teams tend to go at it different ways. Again, Giants obviously a lot more from the back half, whereas like Geelong are too, but they're a lot more direct than the Giants will be. So I think it's all about shape, really. Whichever team is able to, solidly keep their outside shape, not bow down to, you know, again, it's sort of the opposite to Adelaide and the Bulldogs. I think it's actually the team that restrict the opponents for a longer bit of time, as opposed to get that offensive domination.
Yeah.
And I think the Giants are capable of doing that. Again, well, it's more on the onus of the Giants to restrict, I should say.
Yes.
Whereas Geelong could probably just offensively walk on the top of them. But, as I said, the Giants, if they can get a few periods, keeping the Cats quiet, they're with a fairly good chance. Again, this is a pretty top of the table clash. It's like what, third v fifth at the moment, isn't it?
Eighth
Something
versus
like that.
fourth is their matchup right now.
Eighth versus fourth. Oh yeah, Giants are eighth. Yeah, okay. But yeah, so again, and needless to say, it's very important for the Giants. They just haven't gotten too many of those big game victories against the top teams. They're very competitive, but they will want to put in the kit bag.
Yeah.
Although I think they did beat Geelong earlier this year, didn't they? Is that another
they
win
might
at Kilda?
have. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think they might have snuck a win against them back when Geelong was still.
I know they did last year.
Having a little
not
bit
this
of a
year.
patch.
14-17 to 16-9. So
that's right.
I guess that's all the way it's been before. Obviously, they won the last few years. So again, good record for the Giants against the Cats. I do think that this is a bit of a harder equation, though.
This is definitely going to be a harder matchup, especially without Sam Taylor.
Just because of those backline injuries, you know. I can't say for sure if they were full strength in the other contest, but yeah, so it just should be a bit harder.
This, in terms of like the grand scope of things, this is definitely one of the games that should likely be a must win in terms of the Giants, in terms of, making sure they can secure or like more easily secure the top 8. Obviously they do have other opportunities, but that will be dependent on the Suns and on Freo and on Hawthorn as well.
Yeah. I think it's just their percentage goes sky. It's like the Suns. Their percentage to make the 8 skyrocket up if they win it. So
yeah, but at this point, because of how close the 5 to 9 is, percentage really is all that matters. Apart from obviously, getting 4 points.
Yeah.
But I think, again, Giants do have the wood over them over the past couple of matchups. But in terms of just where both teams are kind of positioned structure wise, Geelong probably should take away the win here. But I think for this one, definitely wait and see who's in, who's out. If Buckley is out, then definitely more favourable to Geelong. All right. Richmond home game time against the Bombers, a Saturday night clash, a Dreamtime rematch, as it were, at the MCG, with no Bolter. Sadly, his curfew is still in effect until the end of the month. So I would honestly, whilst on paper, I think this is a very even matchup. I think Essendon have shown a lot more over the past couple of weeks. And we're just maybe a little too scuffed with injury right now to really kind of defend against the efforts that Essendon are putting together.
Well, the problem with Richmond in this matchup is that Essendon, unlike Richmond, can score a lot from very little entries.
Yes,
so even if the Tigers are, reasonably defensively all right, Essendon still find a way to convert because they convert fairly well. On the flip side, if Richmond can work well on the ground, they may be able to take advantage of the fact that obviously Essendon's backline a bit better since Ridley's come back, but it's still Essendon's defense.
Well, I'm looking at the forecast right now, and it's basically expected to rain all week except Saturday. But I imagine it's still going to be wet, so there might be a lot of ground ball presence rather than tall usage.
Yeah, it's one of the things that it makes Richmond's lack of marking presence better. But Essendon do love a good ground.
They do. They've been really good at it when they've been in it.
Yeah, to generate general play shots. So, I mean, it's just edging towards it. They've been pretty solid, but this is probably the biggest chance for Richmond to not chase another win for the year.
Yeah, I would.
Unless they've got another bottom 4 team.
We play North in Tassie in a couple of weeks, which that's probably going to be a North win. Yeah. I would love to see one more win this season, But with
Yeah.
the way that Essendon has been performing the past couple of weeks, I definitely think they should get the victory over us this week. I just want to see a little bit
Yeah.
more, just a little bit more improvement, especially from our tools if they're able to be utilized, and it's not so
Mm.
much a wet weather game, especially like Sims and Fall. Like they have had solid performances when they have been in, but again, it's not. It's only so much that we can ask from them being young, tall,
Yeah.
forwards.
I,
But yeah,
I do find it ironic though, like last year, Essendon were winning and we had like zero faith. And now this year, like Essendon's losing.
But
You know what I mean?
yeah, but the difference is the fact that like Essendon are putting up much more spirited performances and
Yeah,
showing a lot
exactly.
better development. It was a
And
lot. It was
obviously they're
still really
listening
hard to
games as
put
well.
faith in Essendon just in general.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know what I mean. It's like you temper the expectations a bit, and yeah, as I said, I just thought it was funny. You know, I was thinking back on it. I think I had this thought a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't really like have an opportunity to put it up. But yeah, this is like the prime example of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. All right, jumping over to our next Saturday game over at Optus Stadium, where the Dockers host the Hawks, and again, this is basically another top eight
Mm.
matchup, even though it's ninth to fifth, and basically it's a must-win game for both teams.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, it's one where Freo has to win to put pressure onto the A, but in the laws of Newton, it would mean that the Hawks then become in danger of dropping out. So, yeah, absolutely huge contest. And this is one where, again, it's going to be an inside versus outside contest because
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned that Freo on the outside haven't been I would say like they've been bad, but you know what I mean. Like they've focused a lot more on the inside contest, but they've been a bit shaky. Up against Hawthorn, though, I definitely do think they get a bit of an advantage as long as Meat doesn't have a big revenge tour game, I suppose, against his former club, where he played like what was it, like 10-ish games there?
And he
I
played a
can't
very
remember.
low amount of games, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I never had faith in him free. I'll be honest. I wasn't a big hater, but I definitely didn't be a near top rockman. So again, amazing that transformation for him. In terms of generalities, I think on Fremantle, I think on paper at home Fremantle should be a bit better. Obviously
Good.
Hawks connect up with their forward line a bit more.
Yeah.
I do think that Freo defensively can give a few headaches. So, like, as long as they convert well enough forward, I do think that they can generate stuff. And I know that Hawthorn do have the tools to defend Freo's tall forwards. Freo's just, no matter what the matchup is, they always get a few goals. So, whether that might be Jackson coming in late, causing a bit of chaos, whether that's Tracy leading up, taking a few players. I imagine he'll get battle. I think
Yeah, I would assume
Amos,
that Tracy gets Battle. Barris probably
yeah,
gets Amos.
Amos, I would imagine. And then Scrimshaw probably will take Voss and try and intercept off if he gets another game. So,
Yeah, and then you've got
um,
you've got Amon, you've got Impey. They'll take Dudley and Reed if they're running about in that forward line.
yeah,
Or one of
however
them
that
might end
sort of.
up. Oh no, sorry, no, that's same team. Who would play on someone like Ambrosio? Would it be Sharp?
Oh, Sharp will make it back. I mean, it will be a Driscoll.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's right.
And O'Driscoll's a good runner, so yeah, as I said, but yeah, that's it. That's the thing I was going to say is that yeah, as I said, Freo have got to keep transition a bit tempered. Not that Sydney were like that lethal from it, obviously, but
Mm.
obviously, and that's where I said that. That's why I think the matchup is actually favouring Freo a tiny bit. I do think they actually up on the outside fairly well. So, yeah, it's more just not getting too many easy back off turnovers, launching spring attack back. Because as long as they keep Hawthorn, to the honest, one-on-one contest, they should be able to. But it'll be close.
Yeah, I definitely think it'll be close. This is very much probably the coin flip game of the round. Like all of the Saturday
Yeah, I mean,
games,
yeah,
even Richmond Essendon, all basically potential coin flips, all very close games. It could really be a make or break. After the two rounds of perfect rounds of tipping people have had,
Yeah,
this might be the complete opposite.
the few headache ones. Yeah, so and I mean it just doesn't get any easier as we're going to the other
Mm.
on Sunday,
Yeah,
but still
these are
just as
all
hard as
kind of the dead rubber games. They have no effect on finals, but in terms of tipping competitions
Hey,
and
hey now, as I said, if Port wins 7 out of 7 and some result,
Sydney have to do the same thing to
I
be fair. But like
I think Sydney have like one loss variable, but yeah, it's pretty much the same.
this is basically in terms of what you want to see from these last three games is you just want to see
Yeah,
steady improvements, especially from North St Kilda and West Coast, in terms of like
yeah,
structure and game plans and stuff like that. And then for Melbourne, Sydney, and Port Adelaide, potential progress
set
in
up the
terms
structure
of
for next year,
yeah
pretty
that
much.
and
You're
good
unlikely to make it. Treat it as if you can, but then take what you can into next year.
yeah, and also try and generate some sort of a good run of form or continue on a solid run of form in terms of Sydney's case, especially, that you
Yeah,
can use as momentum to use in your next couple of weeks to really upset teams that are still playing for finals.
yeah, exactly.
But we will
Um,
start with Melbourne and North at the MCG, and well, we
yeah,
know that North can actually play the MCG. Somewhat
mm,
considerably well. Again, they won it. Granted, it was against Richmond, but they won against Richmond. They've had a couple of
yeah,
favorable games there this season where they've looked decent. But Melbourne, again, very 50-50 team right now. Like they're still kind of finding their footing in some areas, but North could
yeah.
find a potential upset here.
Well, I mean, it's weird because it's like Melbourne's a bit 50, but like when they faced them last time, like this was the game where we realized that Melbourne were a bit arse. When
True,
North Melbourne beat them in round two.
true. Yeah, but that was also
Um,
round two. We're now in round 18. It's been
yeah,
16 weeks
that was
since
the
then.
Adelaide trip. I remember that, seeing that at the airport. Yeah, so round two, round one, I can't remember. Whatever you lined up
Round
to,
two.
but
Round two is
yeah.
correct.
But again, it's a bit of a different situation. Melbourne, yeah, a bit up and down, but they at least have the game where they look fairly competent.
Mm.
North Melbourne, as I said, theoretically, a couple of putrid games, a couple of good wins. So there's a bit of mixed bag from them too. But yeah, I think both teams will just be like, this is a please believe we're not totally incompetent sort of game. Um, and yeah, as I said, again, Melbourne defensively, they want to put on their straps, prevent North from just beating the ball up to Nick Larkey and or Paul Curtis on the ground. And as for North, they want to prove that as I said, because again, Melbourne are pretty decent the last few weeks, moving the ball from the outside, and that is
Yeah.
where North very weak, both ways in terms of their own generation and their generation off. So I think for North to win, they just got to limit turnovers. That'll be the main thing. You can't give Melbourne any easy score, guys. If you keep it hard enough for Melbourne, they just won't pace you. But as for Melbourne, if they keep their eyes open, expose them in their chances. Yeah, I do think they can get a bit of a redeem game. Again, probably leave it up till teams announce for this game, but I'll probably lean to North.
I definitely think waiting until teams are revealed,
Just
but it's
maybe.
North could
I
definitely
don't
cause
think
an
it's
upset, and I'd like to put him in favor, but again, it's hard to
Mhm.
tell. Like again, they have had some fairly solid wins and fairly solid performances on the MCG this
Yeah,
season. Again, obviously they had that win against Melbourne very early in the season. But 16 weeks is a long time. No, Melbourne, sorry, Melbourne has looked a lot better recently. Again, still somewhat 50-50, as I said, but they've looked better. Um, but North could definitely come out and surprise them with the better development that they've had over the past couple months.
well, not Melbourne just have as I said, better. Melbourne have better players, but like what I mean is like North
Yeah, but as we've
seem to
seen, better players doesn't mean better performance.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, you know, nor theoretically in terms of natural growth, definitely have the potential to still beat them in this arm wrestle.
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's just jump over now to across the other side of the city, actually, over at Marvel Stadium, where the Saints will host the Swans. And again, if Sydney want to have that potential hope of breaking into finals and
Mm.
surprising and causing an upset as to what's already currently touted with fifth and ninth, fifth to ninth, I should say. They definitely need to win this game.
Yeah, but I mean, as we saw a bit last year, St Kilda are one of the rare teams that actually match up well inside and outside. Because again, they're more restrictive. Again, we've mentioned how much that Sydney rely on their midfields. Again, last month it's been a lot more even.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, they're still going to have to rely on um, blah, 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 McLean.
Yes.
If Amadi's out, it does actually swing the game into more favour. It's probably get credit for.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, you're still back in Sydney. I mean, you know, as I said, they've still got a lot of good performance in the middle. And, you know, both teams can be turnover heavy from the back half. It's just, I think that Sydney do generate. They've got a bit more exciting movement from their back half. Like, I'd rather Blakey running on that wing than, as I said, Sydney bombing it long because, you know, I do think that Sydney can get a few higher up interceptions. You know what I mean? I think if St Kilda just do boring entries and, you know, like boring movement, I think that Sydney can defend it. Yeah, as I said, it's just, you know, as long as they keep control of the middle, they should be all right. But again, that'll be what causes another upset if St Kilda do come on top. I do think that there is like it only exists in the 65 to 70 range this game, despite St Kilda being a bit arse and Sydney improving.
Here's the real question: is James Jordan? Who does he go to? You would assume that purely just based on performance, you would put him on Naz, but I don't think they match up well in terms of just pure size for one.
Yeah, I mean, one's fast and pacey. The advantage of is the fact that obviously James Jordan can kick a few goals. I'll probably imagine Sinclair. Like, you know what I mean? It's like he's a bit slower.
He's slower, and Sinclair is a lot more pressure based rather than transition based. More recently,
Sinclair's more likely to find the targets, you know, to slice and dice. And as I said, I actually don't. You know, I think if St Kilda just bomb the ball long, you know what I mean? It's
which
like
is a fair chance they'll do.
Gordon is very underrated. How much two-way runner. You know, as I said, they probably putting Wood a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, because as I said, what's his name? Both the tolls for Saints just have been a bit not
Owens and Sharman.
Owens and Sharman, yeah, haven't really been cited all that much the last month. So, you know, puts a bit more pressure on putting the taller targets deep.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why Saints have lost a bit of structure. But you know what I mean? Is like they still find avenues. They're very creative, St Kilda.
They are.
Annoyingly so, because they're still bad.
That is something that we have given them a bit of praise for over this season, is that they are very creative, especially when they haven't had Max King out there all season long, and they've had to just make do with what they've got. And finding Max Hall out of a 5-win team out of the Box Hill VFL, like, has definitely given them a bright spark in terms of at least having a little bit more reliability in terms of tolls up forward.
I don't think it's that tall, is he?
He plays tall.
Like a 185.
Yeah, he's like a 185, 190, but he plays tall regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like similar to Mason Wood, really, just a bit smaller.
Yeah. But yeah, just in terms of just pure matchups, I think Sydney definitely more favourable here. But again, stranger things have happened. St Kilda could just decide to show up and shut them down well. Who knows? Let's jump over to our last game of the round over at the Adelaide Oval, where Port Adelaide host the West Coast Eagles. And kind of on paper, on stats, you would expect Port to completely dominate the Eagles here. But are you expecting anything specific from this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, Port, again, being known for being a clearance team, again, against one of the worst clearance teams, like, it's about matchup. It'll be how the Eagles approach their opportunities, and how much, I guess, Port sort of limited them. Again, they might be a bit exposed in defense. Eagles can be a bit efficient. Someone like Liam Ryan, I could imagine. He's still on the park, isn't he?
I believe
I think
he's
so.
still out there, yeah.
Yeah. So he might be a player that's like, a bit right, like maybe Cripps even tries to get into the game. Again, exposing those probably weaker defenders. But the big question is, can Ruben Gibney, he had a pretty fantastic game. I don't even know if he specifically matches up. But you'd imagine he might go on Mitch Georgiadis, and that'll be a tough assignment. He himself has rocketed up to, I think, third in the Coleman.
Well,
as it stands at the moment.
it'll either be Jinby or Edwards who would match up on Georgiadis, I would assume.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say, like, Jibney might go on Lukosius, because he likes wandering. Like, he's good with possession as well. So,
True.
Yeah, so as I said, defensive, they'll want to get them. Like, you would imagine Paul will still score. Again, it's about limiting that damage. But yeah, as I said, you just try and keep your defensive matchups honest. So if Port muck around with it in their forward line, you might score a bit the other way. But again, it will be for the Eagles taking much advantage of when they do get, because you would imagine on paper it should be a forward territory game to Port Adelaide. Still fairly full strength midfield. They should get the ball forward. Yeah, not much to say really.
No, there isn't. Like it's an expected Port win, but you want to hope that Eagles have some fairly decent matchups and can shut Port down in some avenues. Again, I don't think, at least against the Eagles, I don't think the loss of Rats and Sam Pepper and Vicentini, I don't think are going to matter too much here.
But we could see BJ Williams dominate as both ruckman and forward. Because he probably would have got Rats. He probably would have got Rats or Aaliyah. It's a bit 50-50 when he went forward. And he probably would have got Vicentini when he rucked. So who knows? If he has, you know what? Bonus weird prediction of the round.
Go on.
I'm backing my boy BJ. 100 Supercoach points. Lock him in. Trade out whoever you got at R1. Put in my boy BJ. Lock it in, Eddie. Lock it in.
Yeah, watch Sweet just have an absolute monster performance against him.
It's possible. It's possible. You know what? 100 Supercoach points and 2 goals.
Oh, the 2 goals might be pushing it.
I mean, 100 was pushing it.
Oh yeah, I know, but
yeah.
All right.
I put more faith in this than my other prediction, and I've already forgotten my other prediction.
I think it was it 100 points each? 100 plus points each?
No, it was 80 points off turnover for
80
Brisbane.
points off turnover, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Which honestly, that is probably more likely to happen than this one.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah. I'm going crazy with it. We're end of the season, we're getting a bit loose.
Yeah.
Bringing in the fun.
We are.
Before finals.
Well, I mean, we gotta start, having a bit more fun, because we're gonna have to start popping out some bonus episodes soon, talking about the team's runs home and things like that. So that won't be
next week, I think.
That won't be next week, but that'll probably be the week after, because round 20 is pretty much the final 5 games. So we might touch on runs home with the final 5 of each team. It's a lot easier to structure with 5 games, I think.
Yeah. Nah, you're right. I didn't math.
We will touch on that in about 2 weeks. We'll let you all know, of course. Yeah. But until then, thank you all so much for coming to hang out, coming to leave comments, coming to like, coming to subscribe, coming to just support us and listen to us ramble and talk trash about every team or talk praises about every team. I am obviously doing a lot more streaming as of late. So please go check me out on my socials and my Twitch if you want to go see what I'm up to. Again, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, I am playing through Indiana Jones and the Great Circle at the moment. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4. The remake comes out tomorrow, as of recording this being Tuesday. So I might be streaming that throughout the week as well, plus, my usual Overwatch stuff. Socials, any updates and things like that. I will be boots on ground for Richmond v Essendon Saturday night, so that'll all go up there on our socials. So please go check in on those. Otherwise, I don't think there really is much more for us to leave you with. Is there anything exciting coming up for you this week?
No. I also apologize. I sort of realized I forgot to put the lighting on to start the episode, and then I realized
You're fine.
like a campfire horror story, just going up under the chin.
You're all
I don't
good.
know. Yeah. So I apologize for that. But apart from that, I don't have much coming up this week. I have a concert on. I think that's the week after. But yeah. So yeah, that's just boring week for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I could take boring. This
nothing.
week.
Nothing wrong with having a little more of a mediocre week. Something a little bit more chill. But yes, thank you all so much for coming and hang out, and we will see you all next week for episode 67. So until then, have a lovely week and take care.